Welcome to Dahlonega and to the University of North Georgia. Many of us that have grown up in North Georgia probably more affectionately call it North Georgia College because we had a lot of family and friends that went here, and that's just kind of what we referred to it. And then it became North Georgia College and State University, and then it graduated and went on to become University of North Georgia. But either way, a beautiful place in the hills of North Georgia and a wonderful school. And for many of us that had friends, like I said, friends and family that went here, a lot of good memories at this place as well. So welcome to all that are here. And I know we've got some folks that are trying to figure out how to get around some curves to get up here this morning. So all the Flatlanders are having trouble with the curves, I think. Some made it already. Corbett and Dominic and Clay got up here, so we're glad to see them. And my co-chairman, he was actually early this morning for a change, so note that. He rode with y'all. He got 2 gold stars.
I had three people that wrestled me out of the hotel at 6.
But anyway, we're going to get rolling here on the first day of 3 days worth of meetings to kind of wrap up our work for this year and put together the package that we intend to work on and shepherd through the upcoming session. But at this time, a young lady that has become a friend of ours, and I've enjoyed watching her as she has came into her role as president here at University of North Georgia. President Bonita Jacobs is going to bring some warnings, some welcomes. And after that, Sam Norton, who's the mayor here in Dahlonega, will come up, and then Chris Dockery is the commission chairman here in Lumpkin County. And he is also going to do a little bit, he's going to pinch hit for Miss Dee Harris, who is unfortunately under the weather, but the chairman is going to do a little pinch hitting for her with a presentation from the Development Authority. So after President Jacobs, if mayor and the chairman then would go on up, we'd appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, and welcome to Dahlonega. I will bring welcoming and greetings. I wish I had a little more sunshine for you, but we'll forego that. We did have spring earlier in the week, so I'm not sure what happened to that, but we're very, very glad you're here, and I want to especially welcome Chairman England and Chairman Powell and the council members and guests all to our great campus here. And as Chairman England pointed out, we did consolidate it was announced in January of 11. I'd been president for 6 months, and it was quite a surprise. And then in January of 13, we became the University of North Georgia. Since that time, we have grown 34%. We're right at 20,000 students, and we have 5 campuses. We are among the fastest growing universities in Georgia, of course, but then this region is growing very rapidly, and we have a strong brand. We're second highest in the number of dual enrolled students in the state, but we cover a 30-county region where we are the primary institution. Now, we have students from every state, and I used to tell people we have students from every state except 4, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, and Vermont, but we've closed that gap. And so we have them from every state now, and yet 80% of our students come from this region. When we consolidated, it was never my intent to go after rankings or awards or whatever. We simply worked to be as strong as we could be, and the awards and rankings have followed. We have been named for 3 years as on Forbes' top college list. We had not been named before. We have been for 2 years third behind Georgia Tech and Georgia. This year we're 4th. And so we're pleased to have that recognition. And as they say about presidents, if the universities are on the list, we like the ranking. If we're not, we don't care for it. So we are pleased to know that we care for most of our rankings. We are also regularly make the top 25 of U.S. News and World Reports for regional public universities in the South, and we are again on that list. There was a new ranking with that this year, and it was for the most innovative institutions, and that was not a multiple choice, it's name the ones, and we were very pleasantly surprised to find ourselves on that list, because it's our peers who are telling us that. Our peer rankings also went up this year. That helps us as we're recruiting new faculty and staff members, because they do come from all over the country, and our pools are very, very strong now. So we're very pleased with that. But what we're most pleased with the U.S. News rankings is that we're number one in our sector for students graduating with the least amount of debt. We're number 2 in the nation. And I'm asked sometimes, why? What are you doing for these students to graduate with less debt? First of all, we recruit very high-achieving students. Yes, we're growing very rapidly, but we're raising standards as we go. We also, so therefore our students, many of them are eligible for the Hope Scholarship. Scholarships are a passion of mine. We've increased our university scholarships by 600% since I've been here. We have increased our external research by 500%. And remember that we are one of the 6 senior military colleges, and we stress character development and integrity. So we expect a lot of our students, and I believe when you expect a lot, students are more likely to deliver. We do have a program called 15 to Finish, because if a student takes that 5th year, they lose a year of employment, and it also costs more and raises the debt. So we also have a retention rate over 80%. So once we recruit them, we keep them. So that's part of how we're able to for these students to graduate with less debt. We had the first of its kind student money management center in the state, because we simply have students who don't quite know how to manage money, and sometimes their parents don't know how to teach them. So we help them to stay out of debt, or if they're in debt, to get out of debt. So we're trying to educate as we go along. Our graduation rate is at 54%, which compared to the other like institutions in USG's at 36%. But that is for students who graduate from here, and we have a lot of students. We do not have engineering, and a lot of our students do transfer to tech. So we do lose some that way, but we're among the highest in the state for that. We do have, in our 30-county region, 8 of our counties rank in Tier 1 or Tier 2 of the Department of Community Affairs Job Tax Credit ranking. So I know that's something you all will be working on. I mentioned we have 5 campuses, and we're here. Our 2 largest campuses are here and in Gainesville. The Cumming campus is growing very rapidly. They're at about 1,300 now. They've been growing anywhere from 18 to 30% every year. We have a campus in Oconee County and Watkinsville, and then our new campus in Blue Ridge. Blue Ridge is now in its 4th year. We have had an 800% growth rate in Blue Ridge, and it helps to start out with 17 students to get to 800%. But we're very pleased with that, and we're pleased that you all granted us a standalone campus that we are now working on. We've bought the land, we've had our groundbreaking, and we're moving forward with Blue Ridge. And it is changing the trajectory for the northern part of our state, because we did a study, of course, and there was a lack of access of public institutions in that region. So we're pleased for that. I do want to say a couple of words about our Corps of Cadets. I think you know we're one of the 6 senior military colleges in the nation, and we we produce more Army officers for the Georgia Army National Guard than all other USG institutions put together. We also are a top producer for the U.S. Army. I think most of you know. If you don't, I'm pleased to tell you that we beat West Point last year in the Sandhurst competition. And what happens, it's a Ranger Challenge, and we compete as if they're Army Rangers. We compete with the other 5 senior military colleges. Now, we're not like Citadel and VMI. We're like Texas A&M and Virginia Tech. So we all compete with those, and whoever wins that gets to go to the international competition, which is called Sandhurst, which is in England, but the competition is actually at West Point. Now, never should an SMC beat West Point. Let's just put that out there. That is our academy. But last year, we beat West Point, and we were 4th in the world with our students. And I am very pleased to announce not only did we win the challenge this year, we blew them away. So we have a really, really good team, and I'm sure West Point will be gunning for us. And I was not that I'm mischievous or anything, but I do have one of our presidents is a West Point graduate, and I happened to see him at the board meeting that week. Hey, did you hear? We beat West Point. And he said, really? Really? Wow, that's big. That's really big. So we're enjoying that recognition for now, and just pleased that our students have now succeeded in that again. Last year we had the number 2 and number 5 cadet in the nation out of 5,500 ROTC students. As you know, we had the number 1 about 3 years ago. So our students are doing incredibly well. I want to thank you all for your continuing support of the UNG Military Scholarship Program, which helps our students. It gives scholarships for our students. And we encourage each of you to nominate students for that scholarship. The students, about, as I mentioned, so many of them go into the Georgia National Guard. And last year, 40% of their new officers were North Georgia graduates. So it's serving a very important function for the state, and we really, really need your support with that, both in nominating the students and for supporting those scholarships. And overall, we are just very grateful to you for your support of the University of North Georgia. We are proud of this place. We have made a lot of strides, and most of all, we remember our mission, and that is to serve students, to graduate students, and for them to be highly employable once they graduate. And we are very proud of our track record on that. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Hey, and good morning. I'm Sam Norton. I'm the mayor of Dahlonega. And they told me I had 3 minutes to say most anything I wanted to. I guess I didn't think I could do much damage or embarrass too many people in 3 minutes. But I did get a chance to talk to my other representative down south. I can kind of walk on both sides of the track. Me and Jason Shaw talked last night for a little while, and as y'all know, he sends his regrets for not being here. But I'm originally from Lanier County, so I went from rural south to rural north. And I wish y'all the best of luck because rural Georgia can stand what you do. I welcome you to Dahlonega, this unique Appalachian community where the city and county work together in cooperation and provide services to the citizens and have a great working relationship. And I say that's unique because it's not like that everywhere, but the city and county work really good together, and we realize that we have one community to serve, and it's important to me and the chairman that we work in sync. And I feel so strongly about it that I would like to say it here again today. And I do it every chance that I can, just to say that we do work well together, and we realize what our mission is to serve. Dahlonaga's population is estimated to be about 7,000. UNG hosts about 8,000 students, and at any given time, we've got about 3,000 tourists in town. We're a tourist destination and a tourist economy. We have a daytime population of around 12,000 when you add all of these together, and with the generous property exemptions, it makes delivering services and infrastructure a challenge. That's good, but we're also a good place to retire, so it does stretch our limits. And the reason I say that is a preface to, I see there's a few members that didn't make it to the meeting this morning, and we have our Christmas party next week. So if y'all have any goodie bags left over, I'd like to recirculate those if it's, no, I'm just kidding, just kidding. Dahlonega is one of 4 of the great American Main Street communities in Georgia and one of 100 in the nation. Very proud of that. So I'm gonna brag a little bit now. Dahlonega is the heart and origin of the first gold rush in the United States. And our newly remodeled Gold Museum is a crown jewel in our historic downtown Dahlonega. I hope you have a few minutes later today to come see our lights. We're real proud of our downtown, and we've done a really good job preparing for Christmas. Our local JCs, with less than 10 members, host a festival that we call the Gold Rush Festival. And we'll bring a couple of 100,000 participants to town on one weekend in just a few hours. And of course, parking is a challenge. But that's another thing that's real unique about Dahlonega. We're the starting point of the Appalachian Trail, and many a hiker come up to the mountains to start that. And we also have many leaf lookers, scenic viewer enthusiasts, which are also known as flatlanders, as the speaker so honestly pointed out earlier. I'm from the land of the pine trees in the row also. You're in the heart of wine country. Dahlonaga's newly designated wine plateau, which could bring a significant geographical recognition, much as Napa Valley does to California. We are the wine tasting capital of Georgia. Get a chance to walk around the square tonight, you'll probably encounter 6 or 8 wine tasting rooms on the square. We're the footsteps of the Dahlonega Wine Trail with 5 major wineries and many small vineyards right here in this county. We're the home of the 5th Ranger Mountain Training Battalion and Camp Merrill of Merrill Marauders fame since 1953. We host over 500 weddings a year in Dahlonega-Lumpkin County, and that's also economic development in a different way. We're strong members of the Georgia Mountains Regional Commission and DCA's District 2 and GMA's District 2, and we're very proud of that as well. We're home to UNG and the Dahlonega campus since 1873. Our past, our present, and our future is intertwined, and we feel good about that. And other than that, I would just like to tell y'all all, welcome to Dahlonega. I hope you have a chance to walk around our square and meet some of our community, and I hope you have a great visit. Thank you.
Again, my name is Chris Dockery. I'm the chairman of, can everybody hear me, or do I need to use a mic? Oh, I'll need to use a mic, okay. My name is Chris Dockery. I'm the chairman of the Board of Commissioners here in Lumpkin County, and on behalf of the Board of Commissioners, I'd like to welcome each of you here. Thank you for choosing our community to have your meeting. And again, thank you for what you do. Thank you for recognizing the needs of rural Georgia, and I applaud each of you for that commitment. It means a lot to us. We're unique in North Georgia, quickly becoming, I guess you could say, a loose suburb of the Atlanta area, but we still face some of the same challenges that other communities in rural Georgia face. Before I go any further, Dr. Jacobs mentioned that she loves lists and she loves those accolades. There's one that she failed to mention that I think is very important. our football team is still undefeated. So I'm always trying to get her to help us with the football team. But this, you see this sign here. Most of you that came up 400 probably saw this sign as you came into town. And this is one that we created with a grant, with a T grant, and really hope that it helps welcome people to Lumpkin County and Dahlonega. I'm not going to go through each one of these things. These are some of the things that the mayor mentioned. The Dahlonega Plateau, that's huge. That's a federal designation. And we think that our wine industry here is important. It's important for agritourism, and the mayor also mentioned the weddings that we have here. This certainly supports that. Those are great venues. People love to come here, have their weddings because of the beauty, and there's just something about the attraction of that wine that really helps them come to North Georgia as well. I don't know what that is, but City of Dahlonega, we only have one incorporated city here in the county. Makes it easier. I've only got one mayor to discuss things with, so we do get along well. I can't say that it's always been that way, but we work well together with the city. We share the same needs, the same desires, and we share resources. So we work well with the City of Dahlonega, and I think that's important. University of North Georgia. I can't imagine what our community would look like without the University of North Georgia's part of Dahlonega and Lumpkin County. It's a big employer. It's a big economic engine here, and we're just so delighted that they're here, and we want to take every opportunity that we can to support and the university as well. I graduated from North Georgia College in 1989. I was in the Corps of Cadets here. My son is also in the Corps of Cadets, and one thing that I'm very proud of, Dr. Jacobs mentioned the National Guard. I went to school here on the Georgia Military Scholarship that I received in 1985. My son is going to school now on that same scholarship. So without those opportunities, I probably would not have had the opportunity to, without that scholarship, I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to college. So I thank you for doing that. I served 26 years in the Georgia Army National Guard. I finished my career with 32 years in the Army Reserve. So I attribute that to the foresight and the leadership of our legislators that created that scholarship. So thank you for doing that. Also, Camp Frank D. Merrill is the home of the mountain phase of Army Ranger training. That's a big boost to our economy. They live here. Their children attend our schools. And those are some of the things that we have in the community that's pure gold. We all know this, #1 state for doing business for 6 consecutive years in a row. And I don't think that just happens. You know, that happens with leadership from the state level on down. And so we're proud to be a part of that. We have new manufacturing here in Lumpkin County. Arcadia is a business that located from another community in Georgia. They make louvered shutters for upscale homes and restaurants, and they're located here. They partnered with our development authority. They currently just bought the facility that started out with a lease with an option to buy, and then Wahoo Docks. Wahoo Docks is is the biggest manufacturer of docks in the United States, so we're proud to have them here in Lumpkin County. Job tax credits. Everybody knows that the tiered system, we're currently a Tier 3 county. When you look at some of these numbers right here, you look at the per capita income. These are all Tier 3 counties by the tiered system. But if you look at the per capita income, you can see the disparity there between DeKalb, Fulton, and Lumpkin, $21,000 up to nearly $40,000. So one of the other takeaways, too, when you look at that, Lumpkin County is 283 square miles. So it's about the size of DeKalb County, about half the size of Fulton, but we have 44% national forest. So that makes us a little bit unique from some of those metropolitan areas. So moving on from the tiered system there, we'll talk a little bit about broadband. Back in the early 2000s, we saw the need for broadband here in Lumpkin County. So we started looking at to what it would take to have broadband in North Georgia. We figured out that, or in Lumpkin County, we figured out that this was a task that was way too much for one single county. It was just more expensive than we could ever imagine. So we started looking from a regional perspective. And the end result from the stimulus packages that came down from the federal government, this was the first technology stimulus package that was awarded in the United States, and it formed the North Georgia Network, and this is a broadband loop through North Georgia. And there is partnerships with the EMCs to make this possible. So this was certainly a success story here in Lumpkin County. Some of the challenges that we still have, and this is some of the local areas, when this was ran, it basically was ran from the northern metropolitan area up to North Georgia, this fiber optic. And when we got to Lumpkin County, we basically have an interstate that runs through here of broadband, but we don't have any tributary roads. So all of the last mile build out went to areas that are serviced by the EMCs that partnered with the program. So the University of North Georgia benefits from it, the school system benefits from it, some of the downtown areas, but when we really get out into rural Lumpkin County, there's not much benefit from this broadband initiative. So hopefully if we can find an internet service provider, somebody that would help expand this, it's here, it just needs to be expanded to that last mile. I know there's a lot of efforts, a big push for broadband. I appreciate what this group is doing to help with that, and we look forward to seeing that expand. Before we talk about water, going back to the broadband, one thing from a local perspective is the issue with right-of-ways. We love the initiative to bring broadband to these rural areas, but we think it's so important that we have local control of these right-of-ways and not just have unfettered access. And we appreciate all the effort that each one of you gentlemen have done to help us with that, and ladies to help us with that. So we know that ACCG and GMA is working closely to come up with solutions and looking at the interest of both municipalities and counties in Georgia. So we look forward to seeing how all that plays out this legislative session. Water infrastructure in Lumpkin County is very limited. One of the reasons is the terrain is so challenging. So it's not just flat land where you can just dig and there's rock and, you know, gold and everything else that we have to deal with when we try to dig in the dirt up here. It's just annoying to have all that gold up here, but we do the best we can. So one thing with water and sewer infrastructure, our local commitment and the 2020 SPLOST that was passed by the voters here in Lumpkin County, we dedicated $4 million to improving our infrastructure. So we're committed to this. Our community, our taxpayers are behind improving our infrastructure. So we hope that we can leverage some of that and get some help from both, you know, the state or the federal level. So same thing with sewer. We know how it rolls. And unfortunately, we have hills and valleys. So when we hit those valleys, then we have to pump. And when you pump, it's more expensive. So there's some challenges there as far as sewer. We do have limited sewer around the 400 Highway 60 corridor where we anticipate a lot of that growth because of that major highway intersection there. So again, with the special purpose local option sales tax, we're committed to improving this infrastructure. All right, this is some of the things that we need to be competitive. We talked about the infrastructure and any help that we can get through grants. We did one water line extension through a community development block grant to service an underserved area here in Lumpkin County. The tier system, of course, everybody is familiar with that and the needs there. And I think one of the biggest things is when you're seeking business, we all know how economic development works and how people will contact the state and you know, they plug in all the needs of that industry, and then it spits out a list of places that might be eligible. And when you're talking about a big flat piece of land, it's kind of hard for us to even be in that conversation here. So if there's a way that we can get more recognition as far as what would be conducive to our terrain here. So knowing those limitations, we look at some target industries. Back in 2004, I believe it was, we had Mohawk Manufacturing, which was a local carpet manufacturer here in Lumpkin County, and one day they just closed their doors. That was 300 jobs that just went away instantly. And it was devastating to our community to lose that many jobs. And so we stepped back and we said, how can we prevent this from happening? We certainly welcome those size businesses to our county, but we thought, you know, if we have 10 businesses with 30 employees, then we have those 300 jobs, but there's a little more stability. The chance of all 10 of those going away at the same time is pretty slim. So we like to attract those smaller manufacturing businesses. We have discussed the idea of technology with the data centers, the corporate headquarters, research, things like that, all require the connectivity that we're talking about with a broadband extension. And then healthcare. We lost our hospital last year. It closed. We were fortunate enough to work with Senator Gooch and the university system with a deal to where Northeast Georgia hopefully will soon open the hospital back up, and we're certainly encouraging them to expand on the 57 acres that they have purchased at the end of Highway 400 at that intersection that we're talking about. So healthcare is certainly an economic driver. We all understand and know that, and we know that it's a challenge for rural Georgia to provide that health care. So certainly something that we have to continue to address. So with that, I appreciate you being here, and if there's anything that you need while you're here in Lumpkin County, you can ask the mayor. He's got all the money and assets. Thank you so much for being here, and hope you have a pleasant day. And if you do have an opportunity to go out and explore Lumpkin County while you're here, we'd love to have you. If not, please make it a point to come back. Thank you.
I think some of our members have already explored Lumpkin County this morning, just trying to find to get here.
I've seen 600 acres for sale somewhere up the road. I may need to talk to you.
Well, okay. Thank y'all very much for your presentations. And to the members of the panel, at this point, if you need to go use the restrooms and anything, the next speaker's not going to have anything you want to listen to. So it would be a good time to go make phone calls and catch up on stuff. Our co-chairman, Jay Powell, is is going to make a presentation concerning the communications sales tax, service tax proposal, and we'll have some discussion going further this morning about that as well. And he will also be...
He wasn't serious, Ed.
Yeah, it was. But Jay has put a lot of hard work into this as well as several of our staff members. So, Mr. Co-Chairman, the podium is yours.
Terry, thanks for that expected introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the chairman of Ways and Means Committee, and one of the things that we've tried to do in the Ways and Means Committee for the last 4 years is to recognize that technology has changed and the state of Georgia's taxing system has not. And we're trying to modernize the tax code, and I'll give you some examples. If you look at our tax code, we tax limousines and taxi cabs, but we do not tax Uber and Lyft. We tax the selling of a book at Barnes & Noble, but we do not tax the downloading of a book onto Kindle. We tax a CD that contains music, but we do not tax a digital download of the same music. So a lot of these things have changed in the marketplace, and we have not changed with them. And to give you an example of what this is happening, when we went, say for instance, starting in 2002, if you looked at the state of Georgia when we were in a constant state of growth and the economy was growing, sales tax and income tax receipts from the state were both tracking each other and gradually increasing as the economy increased. Approximately in 2010 to 2012, when we hit the Great Recession, both of those numbers started declining. In approximately 2013, when things started to pick back up again, we wound up with income tax starting to increase, but sales tax has stayed virtually flat during that same period of time. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one is the growth of the internet sales versus the bricks and mortar sales, but part of it is the fact that technology has changed, and what we used to purchase in a tangible format, a book that you could hold, or a software that was on a disk, we now digitally download. So it's changed in format, but has not changed in what we're actually getting for the money that we receive. But sales tax don't apply to those. So one of the things that we've been trying to do in the legislature is to modernize our tax code to recognize the changes in technology. So what does that mean for what we're talking about today, which is a communication service tax? Well, if you look, how many of y'all used to have cable but now have cut the cord? Who's done that? I have. Well, on cable TV, because it is on a wire, we charge a 5% franchise tax or franchise fee that goes to local governments. On landline phones, who doesn't have a landline phone anymore? I don't. We charge a 3% franchise fee on a landline phone, but we do not charge anything comparable to a cell phone. So the market is changing, the technology is changing. I've still got phone service. I still watch TV. I just don't watch it in the same format that I used to watch it. Well, the taxing structure is built around what we used to have, and that market is shrinking. So either the tax revenue stays flat or it's going to decline if we do not change the tax structure. So the proposal that we're talking about that this council will be asked to consider 2 days from now is a communication service tax. The state of Florida has introduced such a thing. And let me give you a sort of an example of what we're talking about. Cable video right now is 5% of gross revenues are franchise fees. Landline phones are 3% of gross revenues to local governments, and a sales tax, which is most parts of the state is around 7% with state and local. And then they pay a 4.9% universal access fund, which is paid to the PSC and then distributed back to some phone companies, but eventually that'll sunset. Wireless phones, cell phones pay a sales tax. Voice over IP, which is internet-based phones, has a 4.9% universal access fund. And telecom equipment, which now is being utilized throughout the state of Georgia, we pay a sales tax on that, or the companies pay a sales tax, but a lot of our surrounding states do not have that tax structure, and so we're non-competitive with those states in that tax structure. The CST as proposed basically does two things. It lowers the tax rate. It does away with a lot of these miscellaneous taxes, but it broadens the base. So it's intended to generate the same money, but also to grow as the economy grows and as digital commerce grows. So the CST would be, as it's initially drawn, and I think this is going to change, it's proposed to be 2% state and 2% local. But the idea is to make the local governments whole because we're doing away with franchise fees. We're doing away with the sales tax on telecom equipment. And so we want to make sure that the local governments are not adversely impacted by that. So that 2% may change and be 1.5% state, 2.5% local, but some way to equalize to make sure that from the state side that we're close to revenue neutral as possible, and from the local side that we make sure that we replace the amount that they would have gotten from franchise fees and that they would have gotten from the local share of the telecom equipment sales tax. So the 2% state and local would be on cable systems, which are currently paying 5%. It would be on landline phones, which are currently paying 3% franchise fees and 7% sales tax. So that would be a big break for landline phones. It would be that 2%, or 4% total would be on cell phones versus what they're paying now, which is 7%. It would be 4% on voice over IP, and it would be 4% on digital downloads, which are books, music, movies, and software that used to be taxed at 7% and are currently, because of the digital change in their format, are not being taxed at all, but that's something that we've always taxed, and just recently have they changed formats so they're not being taxed. And then streaming services, which are Netflix and Hulu and things like that, which are what I'm getting now instead of cable TV. And so it is something that used to be taxed at 5% and now would be taxed at 4%. And then the other matter would be the satellite, which is not currently being taxed, would be taxed at the 4% rate. We would delete sales tax on telecom equipment, and we would probably be, to fund broadband, we would probably do something similar to the UAF, or the Universal Access Fund, which is to help rural telephone subscribers. And that would be 2.5% on cell phones and on landline phones, which would still be less than the current rate on those. So that's sort of what the proposal will be that you'll be looking at. You're going to be hearing some presentations from some of the industry providers today, but in order to sort of get a feel for what they're talking about, I wanted you to know what the proposal that you'll be asked to consider in 2 days is. But keep in mind that the ultimate goal are twofold. We want to decrease the rate and consolidate taxes, because we will be doing away with franchise fees. We would be doing away with sales taxes on these various commodities. And then broaden the base so that we are continuing, as the economy grows, that the revenues do not decline like they're doing now, but would actually increase or stay constant. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but that's generally what the proposal looks like. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, one of the points you mentioned was the outcome is to delete the sales tax on communications equipment.
No.
Okay.
No, we would exempt telecommunications equipment.
Exempt.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
What are examples of the telecommunication equipment that?
We're going to have some of the industry providers, but I mean, we're talking about stuff that will hopefully bring down the cost of broadband. That's primarily what our goal is. Any other questions? Yes, sir, Tom.
I'm sure when you broaden the base and increase taxes, that's going to get passed on to the consumer.
Aren't all taxes?
Yeah. But do you think that those of us that still have landlines, because we don't have cell service if you take a step to the left, are going to get a decrease in the taxes on your landline,
Yeah.
supposedly?
Yeah, this would be a decrease. You're
that
paying,
get passed on?
you're paying 7% right now sales tax. You're paying 7% sales tax now and 3% franchise fee. So you're paying a total of 10%, not even counting the 4.9% that you're paying on the UAF charge. So you're paying 10%. This proposal would exchange that 10% for a 4% communication service tax and a temporary tax of 2.5% for basically a broadband grant program. So that would be changing 10% to 6.5%. Yes, sir.
On the agenda, it mentions a fiscal note. What is
Yeah,
it- what is it?
we've got a fiscal note, but what it shows, number one, is that the sales tax on communications equipment will sunset in 3 years, which is not our intention, because that changes the whole concept of the fiscal note. It won't be revenue neutral if that happens. And so the intention is not to do that. And the intention is to make sure that the local governments are made whole and the state government either is even or makes a little bit as the economy increases. But this is primarily to consolidate the taxes, not to be a big revenue raiser for the local governments, for the state or the local governments. And so that fiscal note doesn't reflect that now because it's at 2%, which is better for the state and less for the local governments, and that's not the intention. So we will get a new fiscal note as this process evolves. Anything else?
Just clarify for Tom, the 2.5% that you mentioned would sunset at a given time. So you'd basically go back to your 4% total instead of the 10.
Correct. Well, thank you very much. We're now back on schedule.
You said that like you expect to get some kind of accolades for getting us back on schedule. Our next presenter, there have been some other states that have gone this very similar route. Our neighbors to the south in Florida is one of those examples. And we have with us a gentleman named French Brown that is going to talk a little bit about what Florida has done and how it has worked there in Florida. And he is certainly a flatlander coming out of Florida up here to, he said we could stretch some of these roads out and get back to Florida if they were in straight lines. And that's just to get from one end of the county to the other. So French, thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking time to come present to us today.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you so much, Council, for letting me be here today. And yes, my name is French Brown. I am a flatlander, but I certainly appreciate traveling up in these North Georgia roads. It's been very, very nice. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about Florida's 18-year experiment so far with its communication service tax. So much like you are today, about 18 years ago, 19 years ago, really in the late 90s, Florida took a look at doing something similar, combining a bunch of other tax sources for state and local revenues. Ironically enough, Florida's law is called it's a Communication Service Tax Simplification Law. Just so that you all know, just because you put simplification in the title doesn't mean that you actually simplify anything. But that being said, it was implemented in 2001, and it was a combination from all of these communication service tax revenue sources. So prior to the communication service tax, we had a telecommunications sales tax, similar to yours it sounds like, that was at 7%. A number of other communications type services were subject to the state's 6% sales tax. We had local option sales taxes at the county level in Florida. Florida had a gross receipts tax on telecommunications. We had the local franchise fees for public rights-of-way. We had locally imposed utility taxes and local permit fees. And so the plan was for Florida's communication service tax to bundle all those together, wrap all those up, and simplify it into one source or one tax type. Just to note, probably much like here, prior to Florida's CST and now afterwards, a number of these revenue sources were bonded. For instance, the gross receipts tax actually is bonded to pay for public capital outlay, so public education capital outlay in Florida. So again, a little bit kind of how we first started in the late 90s. The governor created a task force very similar to this to adopt a unified tax of communication services with statewide privilege fee for local governments. Legislature established a working group back then, worked with the Department of Revenue and staff to develop what the new process would look like. Again, the key to Florida's communication service tax was that the plan was for local governments to be held harmless, for there generally to be some revenue neutrality, and to create a more stable and reliable revenue stream, much like you're looking at right now. So what are the services we tax in Florida? Probably no surprise, telecommunications, local long distance. We actually do currently expressly include VoIP, toll telephone services. Mobile communication services are taxed under Florida's communication service tax. Video services, cable services, direct-to-home satellite services. And then what are the transactions that we tax? So we tax transactions that originate and terminate in the state of Florida, or transactions that originate or terminate and are charged to a Florida service address. So that comes up a lot with Florida's communication service taxes. Kind of how do you cite us? How do you determine where the customer is located to collect the correct tax base? Because as you'll see, Florida has a number of local jurisdictions and local rates. Some things that Florida's communication service tax excludes. So we exclude prepaid calling arrangements. When Florida moved to a communication service tax, a conscious decision was made to keep prepaid calling under the state's sales and use tax at 6%, and any county discretionary sales surtaxes. And that's going to come up later, because as I'm talking through kind of some of the significant legislation that Florida's done since its enactment in 2001, prepaid became a talking point later. The other thing that we obviously exclude, and this is a federal requirement, is that we exclude internet access. Obviously, the Internet Tax Freedom Act plays a large portion in this, and it plays a bigger portion every day, because more and more these things become less telephones and more internet access points and internet devices. So wanted to talk a little bit about our rates. So, and I broke it down into prior to 2015 and after July 1, 2015, because in 2015 the Florida legislature put a pretty significant state tax rate decrease. But that being said, prior to 2015 or July in 2015, the general communication services tax rate, state rate, now mind you, was 9.17%. So that's pretty significant compared to the 4% or even the 2% state rate that you're talking about here. But that's where we were, is we're at 9.17 prior to 2015. The next line really kind of takes into consideration Florida exempts from the general state tax rate its residential landlines, much like you were discussing. So that's this other line, this sum residential communication services, traditionally residential landlines. Those are only subject to the state's gross receipts tax rate, so 2.37. Florida does have a specific state rate on direct-to-home satellite. You will notice that these rates are higher than the state rate on general communication services, and I'll talk a little bit about that in future slides. But basically what it boils down to is that the direct-to-home satellite services aren't taxed at any of the local rates that I'll be talking about next. Here you can see the rate cut that the legislature did. So now Florida's communication services tax for general services is 7.44% at the state level. Okay, so local communication services tax rates. And here's where things really kind of get interesting for Florida, because Florida, even though we're a state with only 67 counties, we have a lot of municipalities. And that being said, we have 481, I believe next month we will have 482 starting in January 1, 2019, 482 separate local jurisdictions where the CST applies. And where that can get difficult, obviously for providers, is you have to correctly know where that customer is to correctly situs them to the right jurisdiction, and then therefore collect the right rate. We had more than 100 back in a couple years ago. I know that there was more than over 120 unique tax rates across the state of Florida for the local governments. Just a little bit of walking around information. So the low right now is in Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista in Orange County, Florida at 0.03. And the reason those are at 0.03 is actually those municipalities do not impose any local rate. The 0.03 flows through the county. Interesting fact, if anyone's never heard of Bay Lake or Lake Buena Vista in Florida, those are the two municipalities that are located inside of the property of Disney World. The high in the state right now is Sanford in Seminole County, which is just right next door to Orange County, at 7.6%. So think about that. You got local rates that vary wildly anywhere from less than 0.5% to up to 7.6% on top of a state rate that's also 7.44%. Again, the thing to note is that none of these local rates apply to the direct-to-home satellite. So that direct-to-home satellite rate, if you have direct-to-home satellite service in Florida, that's what you're going to pay. Whereas, again, if you're in Sanford, you'd have up near 15%. This is an unweighted average from a couple years ago. I wasn't able to run the numbers specifically for right now, but the unweighted average statewide was about a little over 5% for the local option. So again, so you have most providers paying about 12.5%. This is just Florida Department of Revenue does a good job of trying to get out all of this information, obviously, to providers and customers that are willing to spend the time to try to figure out how these taxes work. But they have a great website. It has 20 pages of different local jurisdictions for you to be able to go through and try to determine what your rates are. Now, these next two slides I think might be some of the most useful to you all. There's some other good ones, but this kind of shows the historical revenue collections for Florida's communication service tax. So the first year was significant because it was low because it wasn't a full year of collections. But you can see the collections essentially, and sorry for these small numbers, but about $1.2 billion up to about $1.6 billion through this time frame from 2002 through 2008, 2009, really during the start of the Great Recession. Then you see revenues starting to decline. Again, this is just the state revenues. So there's going to be a big decline here in the 2015 range when the rates were dropped. But this shows you kind of how things have kind of flown through time, or how the revenues have worked through time. Again, peaking up at 1.6. Now we're down in about the just over $1 billion or so in state revenues collected. These are the local revenues, so this is going to give you a little bit better idea. Since these rates do vary at the local level, but generally they don't swing like the state rate did in 2015. So that being said, this shows you how the local revenue collections essentially started out in the first full year of about $740 million, climbed up, peaked at $915 million, and now has settled down to about $670 million. 660, 670 million.
Peak.
You know,
On both slides.
yeah, total speculation. Listening to our economists in the state of Florida, I think a lot of this decline happened when people were cutting back on their services. During the Great Recession, people were cutting the cord. People were dumping landlines. That was some of this slide, potentially. The other thing, too, is just technology. Technology's changed. As you said, you know, and I'll talk later a little bit about streaming specifically, because Florida has had some administrative rulings on streaming. But that being said, you know, people may be cutting the cord, dealing with providers that might not have been subject to the Florida tax for one reason or another, and moving to less taxable services. So again, wanted to walk through some of the significant legislation. So these are the things that we've tweaked and changed in Florida over time to, in order to adopt our system. So when the legislation initially came out in 2001, there wasn't a clear conformity to religious and educational institutions, exemptions between sales tax and communication services tax. They came back and included that, made that very clear, obviously put those two on parity, provided an exemption for public lodging industries so that they have to separately state the communication service tax on customers' bills. We created that so they don't have to do that. In 2003, we exempted homes for the age from the tax. In 2005, we repealed the tax on substitute communication systems. That was something that Florida initially tried when they passed it in 2000, was they tried to impose a light tax on essentially a private communications network, a substitute communications system, and that ended up being a lot more trouble than good. So Florida repealed that in 2005 and said that there'd be no tax liability back until 2001. In 2010, clarified that the partial exemption for residential households does not apply to any residence that's part or all of a transient public lodging establishment. In 2010, the legislature also passed a bill that allowed the dealers, the communication service tax dealers, to net bad debts directly against the tax due. So if a customer failed to pay a bill, they could directly net those bad debts against any tax due in future bills. In 2010, this was when, so this was one that I didn't necessarily pick up on, but in 2010, if you saw in the slide on the rates where it talked about pre-2015, that the gross receipts tax rate for the general communication services was a little bit higher. That occurred in 2010, and really what the state of Florida did was they did a little bit of a tax swap. They reduced the state general revenue rate by 0.15 and increased the gross receipts tax rate. That's what this is. And the reason they did that was effectively to divert more revenue. The customer didn't see any difference, but they diverted more revenues into those public capital education outlay bonds that I had previously discussed. In 2011, we made a change. So Florida's sales and use tax has a really kind of unique provision. We have a bracket system in Florida. So it's not the traditional 4 or 5 rounding that you've learned in grade school. There's a bracket system where effectively nearly every fraction of a penny gets rounded up to the next whole penny. It doesn't happen in every occurrence, but it happens in most every occurrence. And when Florida Communication Service Tax initially came in, it followed that same traditional bracket method that Florida had for sales and use tax. That ended up being a huge issue for communication service tax providers. And so in 2011, Florida legislature moved the CST over to a 4 or 5 rounding rule and said that that could be applied either at the line item or at the invoice level. In 2012, we added a provision that allowed communication service tax dealers to unbundle taxable and non-taxable items, as long as the dealer could identify those items in the books and records. The other thing that it did was it created a 9-member working group, so a second working group in Florida, to review key issues and identify options to achieve the stated goals of the CST. I'll talk about that working group in just one second. In 2014, this is where things, and the other thing too that was around in 2012 there was a big discussion, part of that working group and also in the legislative process revolved around Florida's taxation of prepaid calling arrangements that I had discussed. So when there was a conscious, as I mentioned, there was a conscious decision to keep that in sales and use tax. But what they did when they kept that was they said it was clearly for calling. So it was clearly for those calling. And as we know, in the mid-2000s and later, prepaid calling arrangements evolved. They evolved from a calling card where you could put in access codes to prepaid mobile devices where you could have access to text messages and internet and email and all those other things. And so there was a question in Florida about whether or not those types of services fell under the communication service tax or under the sales and use tax with the lower rate. After that working group, and in 2014, the legislature revised the definition of prepaid calling arrangements, so again, the sales tax rate, to clearly include arguably the things that we think of today as a prepaid phone. So a type of mobile service where you're paying in advance for services instead of paying in arrears. And then the last significant, one of the last significant changes was in 2015. We had the significant state rate reduction. All right, so talk a little bit about the 2012 and 2013 working group. This was a working group with 9 members. We had industry personnel on the in the working group. We had representatives from local governments. The Department of Revenue oversaw the working group, but was a non-voting member. And really what they did was they met a number of times through 2012 and into 2013 and developed a report for the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate to advise on, what should Florida do, because we were seeing, much like you, even though we had a tax in place, we were seeing technology changing more rapidly than the tax could kind of keep up with. And we were seeing issues coming up like prepaid calling and kind of decline of general revenues. So a number of things that we did through that is we actually, the Department of Revenue polled all 50 states. We got about 25 results for details on on those states' communication services tax. We compiled that. We did additional research on the other states that we didn't have information from. We had economists come and speak to us. We had members of the industry come and speak on various things, and obviously members of local government speaking up. Ultimately, what was kind of interesting about this working group is the end result, the end recommendation that came out of the working group was for Florida to essentially dissolve its communication service tax. So to do away with communication services tax, move those communication services, those taxable transactions, under the state's general sales and use tax, and slightly increase the rate of the state's sales and use tax, which was an interesting approach. So again, Florida has a 6% sales and use tax. We would have increased it to 6.34%. Again, this is kind of the definition of really broadening the base, because actually you don't broaden any base, but you raise the rate essentially. So you move these communication services that are at an extremely high tax rate, you move them in to just be taxed the same as all sales and use tax items, and then you raise overall the sales and use tax rate. As you can imagine, the Florida legislature didn't really act on this recommendation. And interestingly enough, due to an amendment that voters just approved in November, it'd be very difficult for Florida now to raise the general sales tax rate. But I thought it'd be interesting that this is what came out of the working group in Florida in 2013. So also want to talk a little bit about significant litigation. We did have one pretty significant piece of litigation. As I talked about earlier, direct-to-home satellite services are taxed at a higher state rate than all other communication services, but they don't have that local component. As no surprise to anybody, the big direct-to-home satellite providers, DirecTV and Dish Network, sued the state of Florida and challenged that as a discriminatory tax. This one's still kind of working its way through everything, but that being said, it did go up through the Florida Supreme Court in 2017. And ultimately, that court, one of the main takeaways they had from that case was they said cable wasn't a local in-state interest any more than satellite. While it may be true that cable employs more Florida residents and uses more local infrastructure to provide its services, Supreme Court has never found that a company to be an in-state interest because it had a greater presence in a state. So that's kind of where we are on that one, but wanted to make sure that you were all aware of that significant case that kind of worked its way through the Florida court system. And then wanted to talk a little bit about some of the administrative guidance that the Florida Department of Revenue has provided. The Department of Revenue issues regularly what are called technical assistance advisements. It's kind of like a IRS private letter ruling where it's confidential information. You don't know who the taxpayer is, but a lot of these you can kind of read through the facts and maybe understand, maybe take a guess at who it might be. One of the ones that came before the Department of Revenue related to communication service tax, related to a taxpayer who provided services to motorists. So you'd pay a regular fee to this company, and they'd provide services like airbag notification, stolen vehicle tracking, concierge, driving directions, convenience services, roadside assistance, all of those types of things. And the other thing too is this company actually had hardware located in vehicles that were sold to motorists. So I think we can probably all guess who this company might be. But that being said, ultimately what the Department of Revenue determined in this one, because the question was, is what we're selling, this subscription service, is the service that we're selling to our customers, these motorists, that allows them to communicate with someone, that allows them to even make calls potentially through the service. Is it a communication service? And is it subject to the higher communication service tax rates? And what the Florida Department of Revenue determined in this case was that, no, in this situation, the company was the consumer of the communication services, so they bought communication services, obviously, from a different company. They had to pay the taxes on those purchases, but what they were providing the motorist was a different non-taxable service. All right, and these next two, these are two that relate to streaming and digital video downloads. And again, these technical assistance advisements, they're effectively binding between the department and the specific taxpayer who they're written to. They don't obviously carry the same force and effect of law. But that being said, so the first question the taxpayer presented, they said that they had subscribers that they were providing digital video content to. And the department concluded that because of Florida's broad definition of what a video service was, that was a taxable communication services for Florida communication service tax purposes, and that tax would, even though the service was delivered over broadband network using the internet protocol. In 2014, we had a little bit more of a refined request from a taxpayer that said, I provide two types of digital content to my customers. I rent them digital content, or I will sell them digital content. And interestingly enough, so Florida sounds like much like Georgia, we do not tax, the sales tax doesn't apply to digitally downloaded items. It applies to tangible personal property and not digital goods. The resulting decision from the Florida Department of Revenue was that when you have the rental, that it is a taxable video service. It's a taxable communication services for Florida communication service tax purposes as a pay-per-view or digital video service. But however, the sale of the actual digital video content, if it was downloaded or stored on an online library, would be an information service, not subject to communication service tax and not subject to sales and use tax. So again, this may lead to some of those revenue declines over time. Again, it's kind of the technology. Florida's definitions and Florida's provisions maybe not necessarily keeping up with technology. if you all wanted to twist my arm and ask me what I thought would be next for Florida, obviously I don't know specifically what the Florida legislature may do, but I would suggest that in the next within the next 5 years, I think Florida will take another look at its CST. I think Florida will take a look at various things. They'll take a look at, again, clarifying the treatment of newer technologies like streaming, specifically putting provisions. There have been bills filed the last 2 years to clearly exempt streaming services or digital video content from the communication services tax. We haven't gotten an official fiscal note on that, but when the economists first started looking at it a couple years ago, they were suggesting it could be as high as $900 million of the $1 billion tax revenues. So obviously that's, and obviously all that plays into how you define those terms, how that language works out, and if it allows essentially your traditional cable services to be exempt. The other thing too that I think we'll be thinking about in Florida is the Wayfair decision. I know that Georgia looked at the Wayfair decision for sales and use tax purposes. Personally, I think it also could apply to things like communication services tax, where you have maybe not your traditional companies, because there's different standards for that, but where you traditionally in Florida, you might have had a streaming company that wouldn't have been subject to the tax if they didn't have a physical presence in the state. But now, as states are obviously adopting economic nexus thresholds, that may come into play, and states may be able to, again, clarify that Florida may clarify that streaming is a taxable service, and they may clarify an economic nexus threshold, which may ultimately broaden the base, pick up more services and providers. The biggest thing that I think Florida is going to address is the 481 or 482 local jurisdictions. That's really the biggest problem. Is it's really difficult for providers to correctly situs customers to those areas. So I think with any modernization for Florida, I think there's a lot of discussions, and there's already been discussions between the providers and the local governments to say, let's move closer to a one rate, which it sounds like you're trying to do here, which I would applaud. But move closer to a one rate and make sure you work out the details in a distribution formula kind of behind what the customer sees, to make sure that you keep those local governments harmless. And with that, those are some of the things that I see that might be next for Florida. And with that, I will take any questions.
Are there any questions? I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my third time presenting in front of the council in the last 2 years, which is quite an honor. And I really don't know what I did to deserve it, but I promise I'll never do it again. Stephen Lofton, y'all know me, Executive Director of the Georgia Cable Association. Thank you. We represent 5 of the traditional cable companies. And those companies employ 12,500 Georgians around the state with an annual payroll of $725 million. Those employees are proud to serve almost 2 million homes and businesses in Georgia with video, voice, and the fastest internet service available through our fiber-based broadband network. And I can say it's the fastest internet available because all of our companies have either completed or are in the process of completing the rollout of gigabit level service to almost all of their current service footprints. And in the not-too-distant future, thanks to technological innovations that are currently underway, 10 gigabits will be available to those homes and businesses through the same network that we currently have in place today. There we go. I know we've presented on the issue of tax parity before, and how the current jumble of different taxes and fees developed over time, so I'm not going to go over this slide point by point again. Suffice it to say we have a mishmash of local franchise fees, state taxes, and contributions to the Universal Access Fund, and that this mishmash no longer makes sense when all of the different technologies involved are providing essentially the same service. The other thing that must be recognized about this chart and in this discussion is whether they are wireline or wireless, whether they are small cell or satellite, all of them depend on a network that runs through the right-of-way to deliver either all or part of their services. They all depend in some part on a wire that runs through the right-of-way. My satellite friends can get upset with me when I make this point, so I'll show the DirecTV website page where they encourage their customers to hook up their satellite DVR to the internet so they can receive advanced services, right? Connect to the internet, get connected and get more at no extra cost. These services are part of the basic cost of service. They're part of the basic package that the satellite companies are providing to their customers. And there's a number of these services that we're talking about that require being hooked up to the internet in order to access. Pandora is one of those services. The access to on-demand programs on the bottom left is one of those services, and that's a very popular feature with customers, with consumers. That requires an internet connection. If you want to restart a program, if you're 15 minutes late getting home, you're putting the groceries up, or the kids' soccer practice went over, whatever, and a program starts that you wanted to watch, if you want to restart that program, basically take it back 15 minutes and watch it from the beginning, you must be connected to the internet to make that happen. An internet connection is also required for streaming live and recorded programs to a customer's mobile device, right? And streaming is critical. How many of you have had this experience? You're home watching TV, watching a program on your couch, you know, in your easy chair. Your teenager's in the room with you, sitting, you know, possibly right next to you, watching a different program on their device, streaming a program on their device. That generation, this young generation, they're more comfortable watching television on their device than they are on a big screen, right? They will walk away from the big screen to watch the program on their device. They're all going to be blind in 50 years, but right now that's what they prefer, that's what they choose. So if you
Device, or they don't want us to see what they're watching.
Well, certainly it's not because they don't want to be with us, is it, Mr. Chairman? So that's just how they watch TV. And let's be honest, this is where the industry is going. And this is the part that's growing, right? All of the providers are offering streaming services. This is critical now to the business. A video service that doesn't provide streaming won't be providing any service at all for very long. They'll be out of business in a very short time. So that brings us to over-the-top providers, our friends Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Sling TV. There's HBO Go. There's more coming. A new one gets announced, it feels like every couple of weeks. Consumers continue to cut the cord and switch to over-the-top services that they receive through their internet connection. And as you can see, Netflix now has as many consumers as DirecTV and Comcast combined, right? And this is an old chart. They probably now have more. So I'll make this point one last time. Every company on this screen, every provider of video service requires a network that runs through the right-of-way to deliver all or a part of their service. They all provide similar services. They all need a network to deliver it. So we were given 2 questions specifically by staff that were to be answered for you today. The first one was, if we were to create a communication services tax on items such as streaming, video downloads, and satellite, and then also included the elimination of the state sales tax on broadband equipment, as well as eliminating franchise fees, would this be an advantage or disadvantage for your industry, for your company? And then the second question was, how did the CST and its implementation in Florida affect your business or your industry? So to question number 1, parity is good for business generally, right? Any economist will tell you that the most efficient markets are the ones where there are the fewest artificial restrictions on competitors, particularly when those restrictions benefit one competitor over another. So since we're currently at a disadvantage in the marketplace due to the tax and fee system that has developed over time, the moving things to parity would be an advantage to us because the disadvantage would go away that we currently live under, that we currently compete under. Eliminating the sales tax on broadband equipment will attract investment and help projects that are on the borderline in terms of the company's economic payback model. Y'all may remember this slide from our presentation of a year ago. This was one of the suggestions that we made to the council, was to eliminate or to provide an exemption for telecommunications equipment from state sales taxes, state and local sales taxes. And at least 15 other states have eliminated the sales tax on broadband equipment. So this is not a new idea. There are other states, including some of our nearby competitors, that are already doing it. To question number 2, the industry's experience with Florida's CST has been mixed, is probably how I would describe it. The rate is too high, much too high. It's between 11 and 15%. Of course, they don't have income taxes, so that's partly why that's the case. And there's not true parity, as you just heard, because satellite pays a fee that's approximately 4 points less than the cable and other providers do. So if I may, Chairman, I would make 2 suggestions to the committee at this point. The first is to simplify this issue by focusing on video parity. This is not the first time we've discussed this issue. In fact, we've discussed this issue now for almost 10 years. The last time that we tried to do this seriously was part of the effort probably about 7 or 8 years ago with trying to eliminate a portion of the income tax. And telecommunications service is the hardest part of getting parity done. Between the issues of prepay wireless versus traditional wireless and where that's collected and what the rates should be, to making up the revenues that go to that need to go to the school districts for the local sales tax, and then the parity between the Universal Access Fund, what has to happen there. In our opinion, it's all very complex, and the easiest thing to do would be to simplify it by just focusing on video parity. You can impose a video service fee that replaces franchise fees, which will provide parity, as well as a lower cost for the majority of the companies that are building out their broadband networks by entering the right-of-way through their video or cable franchise agreement. So there are 12 states that have enacted some sort of video parity between cable and satellite. They're not all CSTs. Tennessee, for example, left local franchise fees in place for cable and just did a sales tax on satellite. 7 states have some form of parity with over-the-top providers. And those states are Connecticut, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Tennessee, Utah, and Washington. The second suggestion is, whichever route you choose, don't look to any one state as a model. Right? We think Georgia can do better. It's important to create true parity between all of the providers. If a consumer is watching a program, the amount he or she pays in taxes should be the same no matter how that program is delivered. It really shouldn't matter. Make sure that you future-proof the language, include the over-the-top providers, future-proof the language so that we aren't back here in 5 years when the next technology comes along and disrupts the industry again. Let's get it right this time and make sure it stays in place for a good long while. And then finally, Chairman, we agree, broaden the base, lower the rate, make the fee as low as possible for the consumer. Those would be our 3 sort of broad recommendations to the committee. We look forward to working with each of you on the proposal, and Chairman, I'm ready to take any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned in Florida that the rate, I guess, on satellite providers is less than their competitors. Was there a reason for that? Was there a, I don't know if it's something related to franchise fees or if it's something related to, why do you think that theirs is less?
Representative LaRicchia, I don't know that standing up here before you today, but I can find that out and bring that to you.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
Anybody else? Tom?
Stephen, I don't know anything about any of this stuff, but what is a over-the-top provider? What do they do? I saw your list that you had,
Right.
and I recognized a couple of them because my wife's got all that, and it comes out of my bank account every day.
Yes, sir.
But I don't know what they do.
So the difference is Netflix is the most popular example. Everybody's heard of it, and like you, Chairman, I've got Netflix as well, even though I also have cable service. Don't ask me why. The difference is that when I get my cable service, that's directly provided by Comcast. They're my provider into the box. You can now Comcast in particular has an agreement with Netflix where they will send their signal as well into their cable box, so it's all sort of one continuous unit. But you can have a Netflix account, and this is how it started. You would pull that up on your computer through an internet connection rather than through your TV, through your cable, through the cable connection, right? So they're not dependent. In other words, back a few years ago, if you were a Comcast customer, you more than likely couldn't be a Charter customer as well. Now, you could be an AT&T UVerse customer or a Dish or Direct, right? But you were one or the other, right? Well, with Netflix, with Hulu, with these others, they're streaming services. So they just stream over the internet. You don't have to have you need an internet connection, but you don't have to have a cable, you don't have to have cable at all, right, other than to have that internet connection. So you can get your video now through the internet, through a company like Netflix, through Hulu, through Amazon Prime, any of those. And what we see consumers doing is some will cut the cord, and by that they don't actually cut a cord. They just turn their cable video service off, or one of the other program services off, and they'll pick up a Netflix or a Hulu. YouTube TV is new. They've been advertising quite a bit. And you can have a multitude. Most consumers do. They don't just stop with one. They'll have 2 or 3. And like in my home, plenty of consumers now have both a cable or satellite provider as well as something like a Netflix or a Hulu to give them additional options, to give them additional choices. A lot of the content now is created just
Over
for
the
that.
over the top. So would over the top be something other than traditional cable companies?
They can be both. So, for example, AT&T, their DirecTV product, they now have a product called Sling TV, which is not satellite. I'm sorry, it's not. I'm getting some. Who is Sling TV? That's Dish. I'm sorry, Dish is Sling TV. There's a DirecTV Now, I believe. That's right. I'm sorry, Kevin. So there's DirecTV Now by DirecTV. There's Sling TV by Dish. Which are obviously traditional satellite providers. Comcast, Charter, I'm sure others are working on their own similar product, and HBO has their own over-the-top service, which is similar to Netflix. So many of the programmers are now going directly to the consumer through an over-the-top product. Does that help you, Chairman?
I don't think so. Any other questions?
I think the bigger issue, Tom's just not there enough to be able to watch it, to understand it.
All I know is something called Bippy that's on there for kids to watch.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, next we've got Joel Wiggins from GMA and Larry Ramsey from ACCG to give the local government perspective.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the council. Larry Ramsey's parking and will be with us momentarily, but I'm Joel Wiggins, Governmental Relations Associate with Georgia Municipal Association. And I've been asked to answer two questions for you today. And one is, what does the Georgia Municipal Association think about a possible communication services tax? And the other is, what did our colleagues in Florida think of their communication services tax? Well, the benefit of going third is that a lot of things have been said and much more eloquently than I can say. As the chairman mentioned, tax modernization is something that the state of Georgia, under the leadership of Chairman Powell, has done ever since I've lobbied here in Georgia through the Ways and Means Committee. The House Bill 61 of last year basically allowed us to tax internet sales. That was one modernization. There's been several attempts to this communication services tax. The chairman brought forth language last year under House Bill 887, and there was also House Bill 445 in 2015 by Representative Carson. So first, to answer the question, GMA is fully supportive of the concept of modernizing the tax code. We think that there are a lot of different fees that apply to different services. As mentioned before, cable, wireless are taxed differently. One pays franchise fees, one does not. Satellite is not taxed. We think that the consumer, we've seen in Florida and other places, are making decisions based on taxation, and that's not really, I think, where Georgia wants to be. So we are supportive of the efforts to look into a communication services tax, but we definitely are, it's depending on the details as everything. So what I did for my presentation today is look at other southeastern states that started exactly where we are right now with local franchise fees, and we're asking the same questions that you're asking right now. So I wanted to go ahead and take a moment to go into North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and Florida. So all of these states repealed the local franchise fees, but they did some other things a little differently. North Carolina decided that they wanted to make this an overall sales tax rate, and then they subsidize out payments to the local government based on 2006 telecommunications shares with a population adjustment. This does have some inadequacies, but for the most part it taxes telecommunications just like a sales tax would. Tennessee has a tiered system where actually the first $15, if you have a $15 or less bill, it's tax-free. Up to $27.50, it's an 8.25% state rate. And then over $27.50, it goes down to a 7% state rate with local on top of that. Satellite is taxed at the 8.25% rate. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Virginia rolled a lot of local taxes and fees, much like Florida, into a flat rate of 5%. So what they ended up doing is they included satellite, but the interesting piece about Virginia is they grandfathered franchises before 2007. and they pay out locals based on their 2006 revenues as well, as just like North Carolina. However, they pay grandfathered franchises first. I'm going to show a slide in a moment that shows city revenues from Florida and Virginia side by side. You'll see, as French showed earlier, revenues to locals in Florida go in a curve. In Virginia, they look like they stay flat due to this payout. However, there are inadequacies within these cities and counties, even though on aggregate it looks flat. So I did want to cover that first. A great deal has been said about Florida, so I won't go too much into that, their rates. But I think the thing that is most important that has also been mentioned is why this was a tax. While they were in our shoes and they looked to tax technology and be nimble, there were still holes. And 18 years later, they're still looking for answers and looking to keep up with technology. And I think as we consider this tax structure, that is the most important thing, is to stay nimble and to cause parity with the providers, to keep local governments whole, but to be able to change with technology. So this is the slide I referenced earlier that shows revenues to cities in Florida. And as you can see, this is the local government share, and it stays relatively flat, even though, like I said, from city to city that may differ. So the one thing I think we always ask ourselves in Georgia is, what is this impact on economic development as a whole? So I wanted to look at that because, as we all know, and I don't have to say it again, we have been the #1 state in which to do business for 6 years in a row, and none of these other states can say that. So that's something I wanted to look at. So I saw a Georgia State study that they did in 2013 and looked at some of the parameters that they looked at as to what indicates, telecommunications economic development. So I looked at telecommunications jobs for each of the states I've discussed. However, only Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina had Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. And I also looked at the FCC connectivity maps to determine what has this done to connectivity and to see where Georgia ranks among these states that have made changes. This shows from the years 2006 to 2007 the number in thousands of jobs for Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina, and the percentage of those telecommunications jobs to the overall workforce. The first thing that jumps off the page, other than the fact that Florida apparently lost 10,000 telecommunication jobs over the 10-year period we looked at, is that Georgia has a higher percentage of telecommunication jobs to the overall workforce than either of the other states. Not quite double, but almost double to North Carolina, which is an interesting fact when coupled with the connectivity, which the other states that have made changes to their tax code, Georgia's roughly squarely in the middle of the pack with the percentage of the population with 3 or more wireline providers. And that's what we focused on here, is looking at, and like I said, it's according to the FCC data. So it says that all the states have 100% population served with at least one wireline provider. I've heard in committee meetings where that may or may not be accurate, but we could only use the data we could find. And this also, the 3 or more is the interesting piece, because it has Georgia with more population served by 3 or more providers than North Carolina and Virginia, slightly less than Tennessee, and then less than Florida. An interesting piece to this is that North Carolina, and we've seen the statistics on them, is one of the states that offers a sales tax exemption for broadband equipment. All that to say, this could be inconclusive. It has other factors. We just wanted to look at the data and raise those points. So at the end of the day, to answer the question, what does GMA think of a communication services tax? I'm sure every single one of you has heard us talk to you about local control at some point. So it's no no surprise that our guiding principle is going to be a local component. Chairman Powell, we commend you stating that to keep local governments whole, because that is our number one concern. We have local governments that have been collecting franchise fees for quite some time, and what that does is go to the general fund and in a lot of ways relieve property taxes. So the way local governments in Georgia are set up is only certain things can go to the general fund, and if you lose something, you have to supplement somewhere else, and a lot of times that results in raising property taxes. We definitely think that a competitive system that treats all providers fairly, regardless of delivery, is the key. Someone has HBO Go, we want them to pay the same no matter how they get it. So, and then at the end of the day, I think another of the most important is a nimble system that adapts to technology. That's all I have, and I will take questions from the committee.
Are there questions? Patty?
Yes, ma'am.
Like for the city of Fort Valley,
Yes, ma'am.
that has a utility commission.
Sam Hunter, your mic.
Thank you. Like for the city of Fort Valley that has the elected utility commission that handles all of the utilities, cable and all that, have you spoken with them? What's your thoughts on this proposal as it relates to the city of Fort Valley?
Okay, so the city of Fort Valley has a electrical, water, and cable utility, and the franchise fee, and they do fiber as well. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
So currently they're going to be receiving franchise fees for as was discussed previously. We have not seen the details of the proposal. We will examine the proposal as soon as we do, but to answer that question is to remain revenue neutral would be Fort Valley's goal. We want to make this a reliable stream that we can depend on, because as is mentioned earlier, a lot of these technology services have been able to evade the system and don't keep revenues neutral even. So that's, at the end of the day, I think Fort Valley and the rest of our cities will want to be at least revenue neutral.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are the franchise fees the same from municipality to municipality?
So not always. They are 5% cap and then 3% for telephone, and can be in between.
But if your question is, can I charge one provider something different than another provider, then the answer is no.
That's right.
Correct.
I have to have parity between providers. So if I've got a city-run system and a Comcast, I have to charge them the same franchise fees.
Right, but if one city is charging 5 and another one's 3, if we don't want to do the Florida model where the rates are all over the place, that's going to be a little bit challenging to keep them neutral, correct?
Well, what we are proposing in this, so that it is uniform throughout the state,
Right.
is that the state portion will be 2% or some variation of that, and that the local share will be 2% or some variation.
Correct.
But it'll be 4% statewide no matter where you are.
Okay.
Ed?
Mr. Chairman, this may be for you, but since you brought up the issue, and I agree 100% about not having the pressure on the property owner, do you see anything in this legislation that would allow any provider, any vendor to be able to attach the fee for the services on their property taxes, like we've seen with garbage?
No, because actually this would be very much like sales tax, where it's collected by the state and then remitted back to the local government. So it would not be collected. I mean, you want to have,
I don't want someone calling me
basically
saying that
one-
their
you want-
Hulu bill might make them lose their home or something
right.
like that.
You want to have one point of sale. You do not want a provider having to send a check to Camilla and Vienna and Vidalia and all of that. They'd send it all to the state of Georgia, and then the state of Georgia would distribute it out to the local governments and to the state general fund.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Chairman.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Larry Ramsey with ACCG, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to thank Joel for all his work on some of the data that you've had presented to you, but we were also asked from a county association to give you our general thoughts on a communication services tax, and then also to say something about how counties have fared under the Florida system. And I know that Joel has covered a lot of this ground, so I'm trying not to be repetitive and be relatively brief so you can move on. ACCG for many years has had as part of its platform the idea of moving toward a more uniform communication services tax or a revenue structure that is more uniform. As I know you've already heard, we have very much a mishmash of the way that different technologies are treated, both regulatory but also from a revenue perspective. And a lot of that is just historical, just the way that things have grown up. And so you've heard, for example, the telephone situation, and I think one of the questions that was asked about how those are treated, even in that situation, you have counties and cities that are treated differently in the way that fees are recovered on that. But then you have the different way that cable pays franchise fees, but other types of technology do not. So from a county perspective, ACCG perspective, we're in favor of a level playing field. We think that all the technologies that are delivering similar services should be treated the same, whether that's, and particularly as what we're talking about here from a revenue perspective. And the idea of a communication services tax, we believe, fits very much into that idea, that we're not picking winners or losers, or we're changing the way that some folks are treated differently, maybe more favorably from a revenue source than others are in other service lines within this field. And we've worked with Chairman Powell on this idea with his legislation from last year. We don't know the actual numbers, the way they'd work out, but as I've heard, the concerns would be our concerns as well. How is this going to work out on a county by county basis? We don't have those numbers. We know kind of what in a given county cable franchise fees may generate, for example. From a sales tax perspective, as I'm sure you know, there's not a lot of jurisdiction-specific data that DOR doesn't necessarily track and provide that info as to how much money is coming to a given jurisdiction from a given source. But again, we think the idea of a CST has a lot of merit. We'd love to work with the council and continue to work with Chairman Powell and others in the General Assembly to try to move that forward, so that, again, we've not only created a level playing field, but we've also dealt, both from a state and a local perspective, with future proofing. Let's not build for now when there's maybe new technologies, as we've seen, and getting to this point, new technologies come online that are not covered by our regulatory scheme. I think this is an opportunity also to make sure that everybody is treated the same. And then just a comment on the Florida issue that we were asked to talk about. And I know you've heard a lot of detail, so I won't go into that. But I think the Florida model is, from our perspective, is not the best, just because it has so many different variables, that you have different local governments charging different rates. It's very much not a uniform system. And then you have certain technologies, as I understand it, that are left out, that are not taxed potentially, that seem to be in the same field that we're talking about here in the communications world. So I think from a money standpoint, how has that worked out for Florida counties? Again, I think you've probably heard some details on that. There was, like a lot of things, there was a peak in revenues about the time of the Great Recession. However, since that time, and unlike many revenue sources that we've seen come back, like your income taxes at the state level, those communication services taxes at the Florida level have not come back. I think they're down about 30% from where they were. I don't have the information on why that is, but again, I think part of that is as technology evolves, there may be additional holes that come up, gaps in that coverage. And so Florida, again, may not be the best model. They've certainly tried to address this and did many years ago, but we appreciate the council's looking into this. We do think it's a significant issue both for the state and counties and cities as well, that this is a technology that's continued to grow and evolve while our regulatory scheme, our revenue scheme is simply not currently keeping up with that. So appreciate the council's in hearing from the counties. We will continue to work with you in any way that we can, and I'm happy to try to answer any county-specific questions that you may have.
Any questions for Larry? I don't see any.
Thank you all very much.
All right, at this time, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so we're going to take a break till 10:30. If everybody will take their seat, we'll get started back.
Justin, what?
No, he's trying to get.
Oh, Justin.
I got over here, Justin.
What?
I got over here,
Okay.
He just said let you know that. I don't. I thought you said Jason.
Yeah. I was telling Jason to punch him because he was looking somewhere else.
Oh, well, Justin was looking at you like he was talking to him. I was like,
Tom, can you get that side of the table under control, please? All right, we're going to get started back. Our next presenter from AT&T is Kevin Curtin and Bob Davis from Verizon. So, guys, if y'all will, talk to us about CST.
Kevin Curtin with AT&T. Thanks for the invitation to come address this issue. It's an issue that we've been working on sort of on and off for almost 10 years, trying to go to a more simple tax structure in Georgia for digital products and services and communication services. We brought some general principles that we think are good ones to follow when you're looking at this issue, and our communication tax policy principles that both of our companies sort of agree on, that first and foremost they should be non-discriminatory, meaning they should apply to everybody equally. Communication services should be taxed at rates that don't exceed the tax rate of other taxable purchases, and they shouldn't inhibit the growth of new products and services. So I think your idea of a 4% CST would definitely fall within that. Easy to administer. I think what you laid out earlier would be easy to administer because it's one point of administration, which would be the Department of Revenue, and then they would disperse money to locals. One of the problems we've had over the years about Florida is it's very complex to administer. So I think your point was very much on point. Competitively neutral, should not discriminate based on the provider's type of service. That gets to the whole idea of consumers moving between technologies over time, moving away from what we call linear TV. Linear TV is sort of defined as cable or satellite, moving towards streaming services, over-the-top services. In fact, we started our own streaming service because we had customers really wanting that service, called DirecTV Now. That's where TV watching is going, is over the top, using the internet as its transport device. So we think it should be applied to all services equally. And then it should promote investment. One of the key things you're talking about here is, why are you talking about a CST in general? You're talking about it for, I think, well, in my opinion, for two reasons. One is you want to promote more investment in broadband in hard-to-reach areas of the state. And number two is you're trying to come up with a funding mechanism to disperse grants to do that as well. Exempting broadband investment, sales tax on broadband investment, is pro-growth and pro-economic investment in Georgia. That lowers our cost to invest in places that are hard to reach and hard to make a profit on or to break even on. So that's a very, very important part of this proposal in our opinion. And then we also think it should be consistent with the streamlined sales tax agreement, and that's even more important post-Wayfair decision this past summer. That's going to be more and more important going forward. And then the last one is it should apply to the end user, and then business inputs, to the earlier point, should not be taxed. This is very much like in Georgia we have for taxing manufacturing, we have the integrated plant theory of taxation. You tax all the piece parts of whatever you're making, but you don't tax the inputs, but you tax the output. This is very similar. You don't tax the inputs, meaning me building a network to get to your home or business, but you tax the output, which is the service being delivered to the end user. I think it's very similar in regards to manufacturing, how we treat manufacturing in Georgia. Second point is, do taxes on network investment really matter? I hear this question a lot. I saw a slide earlier about comparing us to other states that don't tax network investment and trying to draw corollaries between the two things. There was a really good study done in 2012. A Columbia professor did a study on this exact issue, and we put the web address so you can go look at it. It's like 74 pages, so I wouldn't bore you with the details. But the things that they found was that on a per capita investment, states that have no tax on network investment outstrip the ones who do have taxes on network investment. I mean, that's pretty simple. If you tax something, you're going to get less of it. I mean, that's just generally a tax principle. So if you reduce the level of taxation, then I can invest in more areas with the same amount of money. And then eliminating sales tax on network investment would increase network investment, gross state product, employment, and broadband penetration in a state is all in this study. So I'll leave it to you to go look at that. But it's a study that was done about 6 years ago on this exact issue. These are the states in the country that do or don't tax such things. There are 19 states in the country that don't tax telecommunications equipment. And by the way, I will mention that nowadays telecommunication equipment isn't just equipment. It isn't just physical assets. More and more networks are moving to software-defined networks, and therefore software used in putting forth a network is very important as well. So I would take a holistic view of network investment. It's not just routers and switches and fiber anymore. A lot of that stuff's being done now through software and not through hardware. So that's an important thing to look at. But 19 states don't tax it. 2 states don't tax broadband equipment. And then 1 state, it's not a state, it's a District of Columbia, is on there as well. I will also mention that even states aren't counted on this slide, like Alabama is showing up the same as Georgia. Alabama only has a 1.5% sales tax on network equipment. So even though it's marked red in this slide, it actually has a much lower rate. Also, Texas, which is marked red on the slide, has a rebatable tax of up to $50 million per year for network investment. And then Colorado caps their sales tax paid by any provider at $1 million. So there are some that are even marked red on this that are like Georgia that actually have a lower tax rate than we do. We tax it at the full sales tax rate in Georgia. What does it matter? I mean, whether I tax something or I don't tax something, how does that equate to me providing more service to anybody? Here's sort of just a quick and dirty example of North Carolina and Georgia. North Carolina does not tax network investment. Georgia does currently. And your proposal is to eliminate that taxation. The average sales tax rate in Georgia is 7.15%. North Carolina is fairly close at 6.95%. If we put $100 million in network equipment in Georgia and $100 million in North Carolina, in Georgia, I've got to pay the sales tax. That's $7.15 million. I don't have to pay that in North Carolina. So the amount of money I actually get to put to use as far as building a network is $7.15 million. Different in the 2 states. What does that equate to? If you're looking at just building what we call just a naked cell tower, meaning a cell tower with no antennas on them or anything like that. If you're just building cell towers, cell tower costs around $225,000 to build one without having the carrier equipment on it. In North Carolina, I can build 444 cell towers with that money, and in Georgia, I can only build 413. So you're talking about 31 additional cell towers for the exact same amount of money just because of the taxation. So I can put my network investment to use at a higher rate in North Carolina than I can in Georgia because of the sales tax. So when you're dealing with a lot of these national providers like us and Verizon, obviously we have choices as to where to build things, and we're going to look for environments where we can put our investment to its highest purpose and highest use. So we think that exempting sales tax equipment on the equipment is extraordinarily important in this proposal and pro-investment. Texas, Bob, you want to talk quickly about Texas example?
Sure. I think this is, back in 2015, Texas looked at doing an equipment exemption on sales tax exemption on equipment. Initially, there was some debate about how much that would cost the state. I think numbers were up to about 400 million was the proposal that came from the Department of Revenue, and the industry came up with a proposal of like 200 million. So what they worked out was a deal where they put a cap on it. The cap was initially discussed as 100 million and was brought down to 50 million. So based on what's happened over the couple of years, they figured out that that $50 million cap was entirely amount. And if you look at what we're proposing in the Georgia estimate, which is 131 million, that's almost 2 times what they eventually did in Texas. So I think that's something we can work with as we look at the proposals for equipment exemption and whether or not a cap makes sense.
And then the last question we were asked was about the Florida example, where the ILEC in Florida have dealt with that system for the last 16, 17 years. I'll walk through this slide, but the end answer to your question is how is the Florida experience? And it's been a mixed bag, quite frankly. It was enacted in 2001, as it was earlier stated. The problem is with the Florida CSC, the primary problem is the excessive rate. I mean, you're talking rates of 14, 15% in some jurisdictions, and it's very hard to administer because of all the local options on that sales tax make it extraordinarily complex. And it really gets complex because of the fact that you have to source where the person is, and that gets very hard sometimes to figure out where some of these products, especially the newer products, are delivered to the end user. The other problem with the Florida example is there is no sales tax exemption on network equipment, so it isn't pro-investment, it isn't pro-growth. So we participated in the working group, one of our employees did, and recommended that they roll it into the state sales tax, but as you heard earlier, nobody's taken action on that and since they've made that proposal in 2012. But it is a real concern of ours that whatever is done is low, is broad, and is pro-growth. And as outlined earlier in Chairman Powell's initial remarks, we think it meets those tests of a general CST sort of approach at a 4% rate and with the equipment exemption and having a very broad base. We think it meets those basic tests of how we look at tax policy. So we'd be glad to answer any questions. And I also scribbled some notes down to myself on some earlier questions in case we don't get any questions that I might be able to help answer.
Ed.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. We talked about this before several meetings ago about exemptions and so forth, and how does this committee get the guarantee that those exemptions would actually be used in rural Georgia? As it relates to Texas, is there anything in their model or anywhere else that says in order for you to achieve the cap or any exemption, that X amount of your new investment must be done in areas that are currently not served?
No, it is very much the integrated plant theory of I'm not going to tax your inputs, but I'm going to tax your output is the whole theory that Texas
Would you be
is based on.
opposed to having a discussion on guaranteeing that at least a certain percentage has to go in the underserved areas that currently don't have the service?
That would be very challenging from our perspective, because quite frankly, when you start to get into those sort of business decisions as to where I invest my money within the state of Georgia, obviously I don't get the exemption unless I invest in the state of Georgia, then we have to start having some issues there.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Well, we're here to see how we can get broadband and cell phone service into rural Georgia.
Right.
Now, why should we be giving you a big tax deduction if you're not going to help solve our problem?
Well, as I stated earlier, I think that the issue here is if you exempt sales tax on equipment, then it lets us take the same amount of capital and disperse it further. So in my example we gave here earlier, I can build 31 additional cell towers with the same amount of money.
But in your speech, you said that you put it where you had the most service. What did you say where the people used it the most? What did you say about that? How do you decide where they go?
No, I was talking state to state. I'm sorry. Right, exactly.
No, now how do you decide where you put those 413 towers?
It makes Georgia much more attractive to deploy capital versus in North Carolina or some of those other 20 states or so that don't tax network investment. So if I can use the same amount of money in North Carolina and build more assets and get more customers in North Carolina than I can in Georgia, This is a comparison, a comparative between two states is what we're looking at.
But right now, how do you decide where you put it, where you put a cell tower?
I want to take a shot at that.
Well, it's essentially based on demand.
Demand, okay, on
It's pure
demand.
economics.
Yeah,
But to Kevin's point, I understand where you're coming from, but from a network perspective and a capital investment perspective, we meet the demand, and as more demand comes up in rural areas, of course, we look at that demand and we place facilities there. But if there's no demand, just economies of scale, it's economic principle, so.
Well, but also keep in mind that part of this is to generate enough revenue that we can fund the broadband grant program. And so this proposal does that. So even though it is industry friendly and doesn't require an investment in a particular part of the state, the grant program does. The grant program is focused on rural Georgia, and so will incentivize companies in order to invest in rural Georgia. Let me ask you a question, Kevin, on the sales, on the cap.
Yes, sir.
Do you have an idea, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but I just want a general idea, because the fiscal note indicated, I think, between the state and local share, that the equipment exemption would cost somewhere around $236 million, state and local. Do you have a number you think is
Yeah.
more realistic?
We've looked at this a few times over the last decade. Frankly, we've taken snapshots of actual real numbers, meaning we've collected data from the entire industry, including cable industry, our part of the industry, everybody. And the numbers range somewhere between $50 and $80 million a year is what sales tax is being paid on network equipment today.
Total state and local?
Yes, sir. So that's why we're suggesting that if there isn't any confidence in the number being accurate, then a cap could always be employed. Obviously, you'd want to put a cap in that was a little higher than what you're currently spending. Otherwise, you're not going to incent additional spending. But you could maybe put a $100 million cap in, therefore taking off the table the risk of going up to the number that has been projected, and then you end up with a lot of additional revenue at the end of the day to do broadband grant, which is, I think, one of the major points of what you're trying to achieve.
And so that would be a refundable credit?
Yes, sir.
All right,
You'd
so
have to apply.
You would actually expend the money, pay the sales tax, and then submit your receipts to the Department of Revenue, and then receive a refund, and then when you hit $100 million or whatever the number was, then it doesn't matter what you spent beyond that, you do not get a refund.
Right. Well, the way it works in Texas is it's pro rata, so they collect them all together, and then so let's say there was 120 million spent, we all get a proportionate sales tax. So it's not, you don't get the full exemption, you get a partial exemption because you went over the cap. But all the carriers are treated equally in that regard. It isn't who turned their return in first. It's just how much you spent and what proportion of the cap you overall eat up.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the questions earlier was addressed certain things drive me crazy. Whether or not, satellite television uses the right of way. I mean, we have a lot of customers. We own DirecTV. DirecTV primarily, our primary customer base is rural. A lot of those folks can't get internet, honestly. That's why we're here, right? So satellite works without the internet. It does. It doesn't use the right of way. It uses satellites, so we launched those into outer space and had to pay a fortune to the federal government for air rights to be able to beam that signal to customers. But remember why satellite was invented to start with. Satellite was invented to provide television content for people who couldn't get cable service. Is really why it was invented. So just want to clear that up. Satellite does not depend on the internet. So.
But a CST that applies to everything, whether it's wireless, wired, satellite, or otherwise, addresses your uniformity, non-discriminatory, those parameters of what you're looking for.
Correct, exactly. That's we're looking for a level playing field from all providers so that we can go out and compete in the marketplace without regard to taxation.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Ed?
Chairman, this is really for you on the broadband grant. are we gonna be looking at a set of, at a criteria that lets us know in advance who is eligible for those grants and who's not?
The Department of Community Affairs is, I mean, there's some in the statute that we passed last year, but they're also writing regs, I think, that interpret that. But basically, it is a service reliability, that they're not a Johnny-come-lately, it's an established company. I mean, they're those kind of criteria that are in the statute.
And the reason I asked that question is because I remember like the Trauma Network and X amount going to Grady, while some of it was being told that it was going to be servicing or helping establish that network in rural Georgia. And I just want to make sure that if we're doing this for the purposes of doing the broadband grant for rural Georgia, that the vast majority of it actually goes to rural Georgia. And I'd love to be.
Now, I mean, the grants are based on there are two components in the bill last year. One set up the grant program. The other set up a mapping program that the Georgia Technology Authority and DCA are working on together. And one of the reasons that we weren't really interested in developing a funding mechanism till this year was that we were waiting for the grant regulations to be written, and we were waiting for some of the mapping to take place so that we could actually identify unserved and underserved areas. And the grants are only available in unserved and underserved areas. So it's not going to be a grant that goes to Cobb County.
So you do expect us to be able to see those mapping and all prior?
Unless it's an unserved or an underserved area. What?
You do expect us to be able to see those regulations all prior to the initiation of the grants?
I mean, we would have to have the regulations in place before grants could be issued.
Thank you.
Tom?
It's my understanding that between last session and today, y'all and the local governments have got right-of-way issues worked out. I understand they gave a lot and y'all gave some to get to where you are.
That's not what my boss said, but
Is that gonna help you if we do this tax deal and all of us vote for it, move toward rural Georgia?
absolutely. What it does is lower our cost of capital to deploy assets, hardware in Georgia. So you're right. I mean, actually, just last Friday, we came to a basic understanding on a piece of legislation on some wireless use of the right-of-way issues. This tax exemption of network equipment will definitely help in that regard. Also, one of the things I failed to mention earlier, which is important to your point, in every other state that a CST has been adopted, all payers of the CST would have equal rights, meaning equal rights to use the right-of-way. So part of, like in North Carolina and in Florida, they've passed legislation and they don't pay additional compensation because they're already paying the kind of the CST approach in those two states. So our contention also, because of non-discriminatory, should be everybody who pays the tax should have the same rights from a right-of-way perspective.
Can I ask one more? Y'all do understand that demand is in 140 other counties rather than the 10 or 15
Yes, sir.
that, you know, get the most attention, which is rural Georgia.
Yes, sir. And about 40% of our capital spend every year, and we spend about 1.7, 1.8 billion a year in Georgia capital. About 40% of that is outside metro areas. So we do understand that.
I understand it costs
Yes, sir.
more.
Yeah, it does. And the nice thing about, and I think I said this in the spring meeting, and one of the nice things about wireless as opposed to wired products is that wireless products, you take those devices with you when you go wherever you travel to. So it actually builds the business case to doing investment in less densely populated areas because, you know, one of the reasons I build a cell tower in a very sparsely populated area isn't necessarily because of the people who live in that area, it's also the people who travel through that area. So there's two reasons to build in rural Georgia when you're talking about wireless products versus a wired product. You're wiring it to somebody's house or business. That's the only person who's ever going to use it. Therefore, the use case in wireless, I think, is actually above and beyond who lives there, which is very positive.
And Bob knows I got a perfect spot for a cell tower on a hill in the pasture over there.
You're on the list, sir. You're on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a different type of question relating to stars. with DirecTV, to get the Stars network, it was like $20+ added to the bill. But just to be able to get Stars without going through DirecTV, just purchasing Stars, it was like less than $10 a month. And so I was just kind of wondering, how was that? Why was it like that? Do you understand what I'm saying? Stars.
Yeah, the movie channel.
Right, the movie channel Stars. In order to get that through DirecTV, it was an additional $20+. But if I just went online and purchased Stars, it was a whole lot less. It was less than $10. And so I just ended up getting Stars without going through DirecTV. So
Sounds like we need new negotiators when we negotiate with Stars.
Yeah.
But typically those things are fairly priced
Okay.
fairly closely together because you obviously want to attract the customer to purchase it through DirecTV as opposed to doing it standalone. So usually those things are priced fairly similarly, but that surprises me. But I'll check into that,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah, I was surprised too, and I learned
Yeah.
the difference, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank y'all very much. Next, we have Ann Patterson on behalf of Dish Network. There he is.
Sounds good. Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Hill. I'm from the satellite broadcast industry, and I'm here before Anna gets up really to talk to everybody about what's going on with satellite broadband. I was in here 2 years ago on the same campus, and we were talking sort of like very theoretical, hey, the new technology is coming, and I'm really here to say, you know, that we're going to get this. There we go. In the last 2 years, we've launched new satellites. They've been deployed. We are now able to offer a high-speed broadband product everywhere in the country. So we're offering a 25/3 service throughout the state. And actually, in some markets, we're actually able to offer a 100 meg service. There's a variety of different plans. I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty. Bottom line is the satellite industry has recognized rural and underserved markets as a business opportunity. And we're looking to grow that opportunity and find those customers because we're not going to be able to hit people, and people aren't going to be looking to use our product in downtown Atlanta. But up here, we can continue to grow our business, and we have to the tune of over 2 million customers. We're able to offer streaming, email, residential business plans, online learning, government. Anybody take an airplane and they're do the internet service through that? That typically is done via satellite service. We're fast, we're secure, and we're a reliable service. We're also using it very closely in disaster recovery. And I know earlier this year, Georgia was hit by some severe storms. I'm happy to say that we've been, through Dish Network, AT&T, and other partners, we're actually providing satellite internet service for our relief workers, recovery centers, primarily in the Albany and Bainbridge area. But we have gone throughout the country to do this and continue to do this. In case in Puerto Rico, which was hit over a year ago, we have over 40 deployments, and that is able to offer a high-speed broadband service where there isn't currently another opportunity. And so we're looking at this both as a way to give back, but also as a way to grow that business and be able to give back and demonstrate our technology and what the value and how that builds. Because, again, we can continue to expand the footprint of this industry. And we would encourage the state to look at all forms of technology as they look at grants. Don't just focus on one type of technology. There is so much coming down the pike that we need to be future thinking of where this is going, where things are happening, and what other industries are out there. And I would encourage you to talk to other industries and see what they're doing, what their plans are, and how they can help the markets and rural markets, underserved markets, in the fastest time possible. So instead of saying, well, we'll be out there in 10, 15 years, we're able to deliver these products and these services today. So what does the future have to hold with satellite? There's going to be more satellites being launched. There's more providers. Anybody hear of this little company called SpaceX? They're looking to launch a series of low Earth orbit satellites. So it's a sort of a web of satellites. Hughes and Viasat, who are our two members, are launching 2 new satellites both in 2019 and 2020. And those are going to be able to offer 100 meg plus service nationally. This is involving billions of dollars in private investment. Understand that each new satellite we launch is going to take 3 to 5 years to build and cost up to $500 million. Truly is rocket science. So it takes a long time to build this. And so as we launch something in 2017, the next generation has already been being developed. The next generation to go in 2023 is already being developed. That's a lot of time, investment that's being done because we recognize the importance of the market and how it's going to grow and the demand that's going to grow. And ultimately, technology is going to drive the market. So I would encourage the state to look at everybody that's out there, discuss things, meet with the different players that are out there, and look to best where to put the investment so we can deliver the best quality of service to the customers, and we can do that in a timely and efficient fashion. Thank you.
Apologize for that, just getting to know the system. Thank you, Chairman Powell, Chairman England, and members of the committee. I'm Ann Patterson. I'm a partner at the law firm of Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, here on behalf of my client, Dish Network, and it's approximately 500,000 television subscribers here in Georgia. In addition to our almost 500,000 customers in the state, Dish actually has 2 facilities here, one in Swanee and one in Atlanta, where we employ about 1,000 people. And in addition to that, we partner with about 200 small businesses throughout the state who are resellers of our TV service, and they in turn have about 500 employees. So we're proud to be a significant employer in this state. Well, see if I can make this work. Nope. There we go. Since its inception, Dish Network has been the provider of television service for rural America. And some of you maybe out there like me are old enough to remember driving through the countryside and seeing satellite dishes the size of tractor trailers in people's backyards. That's where Dish got its start. In fact, this is actually a true story. The very first satellite dish that the company manufactured was so big that it actually caught the wind and blew off the back of the truck that was delivering it to be installed in rural Colorado. So since Dish's technology, thank goodness, has improved a lot since then, and the satellite dishes, as you know, are much, much smaller than they used to be. But we have continued our commitment to rural communities in Georgia and throughout the country. We provide service in every corner of the state of Georgia, in every county, including many rural areas that are not served by cable television. And as Steve Hill just mentioned, we're not just providing TV service anymore. Dish, through its affiliate HughesNet, is now offering high-speed broadband in every county in the state. So, in short, Dish recognizes how critically important it is to connect rural communities to the internet. And Dish and HughesNet are investing and have been investing their capital in connecting Georgia and the rest of the country through high-speed internet. We commend this committee for the work it's doing to explore how best to make the investments in Georgia to make sure that your communities are connected, and we support that goal. We also support the idea that Chairman Powell has brought to the table, which is that we should be looking, and Georgia should be looking at its tax policy and revisiting some of the tax structures in light of the convergence of technology that we've seen, where you have TV providers providing phone service and phone service providers providing TV and that sort of thing. It does make sense that we revisit our taxes in light of those changes and the emerging new technologies that are out there. the fundamental difference for us, and the one thing that we oppose, is that when we're talking about, we're looking at sort of the pool of taxes that should be considered and what tax equity looks like. Franchise fees, which are, from our perspective, an operating cost that our competitors pay because of the way that they choose to deliver service, should not be part of that calculation because they're not taxes, they're business costs. So we believe in a level playing field with regard to taxation. We just don't think franchise fees should be a part of that. And here's why. Let's see. I'm going to scoot past this. Oops, other way. All right. For one thing, eliminating franchise fees does nothing to support rural broadband in the state. It doesn't raise a penny for rural broadband. To the contrary, it's going to leave local governments in Georgia with a significant revenue shortfall that has to be backfilled under this proposal by new taxes on satellite TV and other providers. Based on the fiscal analysis, and I know that those numbers might change, but this was before me, this is a $500 million hole over the 5 years that are studied under the proposal. And that's before a penny can be dedicated to rural broadband. Now, we were asked actually I'm going to scoot forward because I had this little out of kind of what other states are doing. And so I wanted to move forward to that and kind of what states handle things in what different ways. And our math was a little bit different from what the cable folks had mentioned earlier. From our perspective, the way we count it, there are 5 states that have enacted some form of kind of discriminatory tax on satellite TV over the last few years, and those are reflected there. And it's specifically, usually those are sort of like in Florida, a higher tax at the state level on satellite TV than there is on the cable companies, and there are other proposals there as well. In addition to that, I think if people have mentioned, Kentucky, Virginia, and North Carolina eliminated franchise fees and replaced them kind of with a broad-based tax. I would point out Kentucky, no one's mentioned it. I think we should put an asterisk by that because in Kentucky, the local governments actually ended up suing the state when they did not get the revenue that they had been promised, and the Supreme Court ended up overturning that and allowing them to opt into a franchise fee regime again because it wasn't working out very well for them. So you have 5 states with a discriminatory tax, 3 states that sort of got rid of franchise fees entirely, which is 8 states total. But I think this is the part that sometimes gets overlooked, which is that there are 42 states and the District of Columbia that treat satellite TV and cable and all television providers exactly the same from a tax perspective. Sometimes that means there's no tax at all, like there is in Georgia. There's no state tax on television or cable service. Or it could be like in Texas, where there's about a 7.5% tax on both cable and television. But from our perspective, all of those states treat cable and satellite and all TV providers the same. Some of the states have caught up and include, new types of technologies in that text as well. Some of them are looking at that currently. But in terms of generally treating video providers all the same, most of the country still does. And that's despite the fact that over the last 8 years, the cable companies have pushed 72 times in 25 states to pass these bills, many times here in Georgia, but across the country. So I've been around the country, got a lot of frequent flyer miles doing this presentation, as have my colleagues in the cable industry, arguing about whether franchise fees are taxes and we should be paying them. So, but I think the important thing about that, and I apologize for all the bouncing around, I had that a little bit out of order, is that all of those tax proposals were defeated, every single one of them. There hasn't been a new discriminatory tax from our perspective on satellite TV or a CST since 2009, when Massachusetts was the last state. And you haven't seen a CST proposal enacted since, I think, 2006 or 2007. So this is not something that's gained a lot of momentum over the last decade. And I think, as we've heard in some of the prior presentations, it's complicated and doesn't always work out that well. So from our perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense for, to talk about how we can revisit and reform our tax structure with respect to telecom and video. Let's just leave franchise fees out of it. And if really, at the end of the day, this all kind of turns on this question, a sort of proposal that I've made, that franchise fees are not taxes and shouldn't be treated as taxes. And really, here's why. For cable companies to deliver their service to their customers under the business model that they have chosen, they have to dig up streets and sidewalks to lay their equipment. That is their business model. And not anybody can just, drive up with a backhoe and start digging up a public street. You have to have permission to do that. And to get that permission, they enter into what are called franchise agreements with local governments, and they obtain what are called franchise rights in order to operate that cable system and to have access to the public rights of way. Excuse me. Oops. Satellite TV operates very differently. We have a different business model. We also have to deliver our television signals to our customers' homes, but we deliver them from satellites directly to their homes, from the satellites orbiting the Earth directly to their homes. So we do not use the local rights of way. We don't negotiate with local governments to enter into franchise agreements, and we don't pay franchise fees. From our perspective, asking our customers to pay for franchise fees is really no different than asking, for example, an airline passenger to pay a fee for use of railroad tracks. They're not using that, and they shouldn't have to pay for it. To be clear, though, it's important to point out satellite TV does have its own operating costs. It's very expensive to operate a satellite TV company. We have to design and build, as Steve mentioned, satellites at a cost of about $500 million each. And we got to launch those in. We have to rent launch pads somewhere in the country or United world, and pay for a lot of rocket fuel to get those into space. So in short, I think cable companies and satellite TV companies both spend an enormous amount of money to deliver that TV signal to your home. We just do it very differently, and we have very different operating expenses as a result of that. The one thing that cable's chosen model has that ours doesn't is that it's very dependent on access to local public rights of way, and that's something that they've always had to pay for. So why aren't then franchise fees really a tax? And I keep calling them an operating tax. Why are they not? Well, for starters, they're negotiated. The amount of the fee, I think as somebody mentioned before, is capped at the federal level thanks to some very successful cable lobbyists who got Congress to do that. But the amount is negotiated as part of an arm's length transaction between the cable companies and the local governments, so it can be less than 5%. I don't know about you, I didn't pay my taxes recently, but I certainly know nobody gave me a right to negotiate the amount of tax that I paid. And secondly, I think really importantly, cable companies get something very valuable in return for these franchise agreements that they enter and the franchise fees that they pay, and they're called franchise rights. So Comcast, for example, on its Securities and Exchange Commission filings, values the franchise rights that they obtain from these franchise agreements at $59 billion. You will not see a similar line item on Dish's SEC filings because we don't have franchise rights, because we don't enter franchise agreements and we don't pay franchise fees. Cable companies themselves, Charter also $67 billion for its franchise rights. Cable companies also acknowledge in other forums that franchise fees are not taxes, but in fact a form of rent. This is from a brief that Time Warner filed a few years ago. It says franchise fees are commonly understood to be consideration for a contractual award. They are far removed from taxes. They have, because taxes have no contractual element. And Comcast and the cable companies are not alone in saying that franchise fees are not taxes. The Supreme Court similarly has said that right-of-way fees are rent for the use of private use of public land. The Fifth Circuit has agreed franchise fees are not a tax, but essentially a form of rent. There can be no doubt that franchise fees imposed on a cable operator are part of a cable operator's expense of doing business. And here in Georgia, the Georgia Municipal Association, this is from their website, says, are franchise fees a tax? No. For the use of city property, cable companies must pay cities a franchise fee, no different than paying rent for the use of land or a building. So in short, Supreme Court, the Georgia Municipal Association, the Fifth Circuit, and the cable companies themselves all agree that franchise fees are not taxes. They're rent payments used to purchase the cable industry's single largest asset. So from our perspective, eliminating franchise fees and requiring satellite TV companies to make up the difference is effectively asking us to subsidize the operating costs of our competitors. So we don't have a problem with tax reform. We have a problem with adding our competitors' operating costs into the kind of mix of things that are being considered as a part of this proposal. We welcome the opportunity to participate in a process where we talk about, tax reform and updating the tax policies here, but we just really feel strongly that franchise fees just shouldn't be a part of that. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Ed?
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on stars and have nothing to do with stars.
Sorry.
I appreciate your argument. I've heard from quite a few people, and if the argument is that you're paying for rent on land or a building, does the owner of every building that Dish serves give you permission to put that satellite up? Should you be paying rent to the building owner?
So when we put equipment, like into some of we have like kind of boxes,
Right.
we do pay rent to the building owner for that. But if it's the individual homeowner, for example, that's part of their agreement that they're putting that equipment up. So
Okay, but if it's not the individual homeowner, do you put a dish, only because this comes up quite a bit, do you ever put a dish on a piece of property that you did not get the permission of the owner?
Of the owner. So the answer to the question is
So a renter or a leaser has the authorized, and the owner is not getting any franchise fee for rent of a building, land or a building.
correct, but they have rented out or leased that property to somebody else and given them sort of the bundle of rights, which would include the right to have
You're an
access to
attorney and you
license.
believe that private property owners give the bundle of rights to every renter.
I think that you give some bundle of the rights, yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I could also just answer that, there is an FCC regulation on that, from the OTAR regulation, that does allow satellite dish to be put on a building by a renter, as long as it's in a specific area.
Just one more follow-up on that, because it comes up.
Yeah.
Does that mean unlimited dishes?
It does not need unlimited dishes. It has to be on the consumer's personal use space. So let's say that'd be your deck or patio. I can't just put 50 dishes on the top of somebody's roof.
And do you believe that would you oppose legislation that says you must remove a previous dish in order to install a new one?
Yeah, I think that that's a good question. I think that the OTAR rules address that and put limits on what can happen at the local level with respect to.
Is that a state or is that a local issue then, as you see it?
It's a local issue, but there's a federal regulation, a federal statute that addresses it that has, so whatever the statute, this has come up in many, many jurisdictions.
Yes, I know.
We would be welcome to work with those local jurisdictions to figure out what the right answer is for their community.
Thank you.
Couple of questions. Regardless of whether you call a franchise fee a fee or a tax, and regardless of whether you characterize it as rent for public utility or public rights of way, the distinction between a fee and a tax is kind of immaterial because it basically is a gross receipts tax. It doesn't matter whether I've got one wire or 15 wires, or whether I'm attached to a pole, or whether I've dug up the right-of-way. My fee is based on a gross receipt. And so regardless of the amount of right-of-way I occupy, I could occupy 10 feet laterally across because I've got 6 wires, and someone else can occupy 1 wire, and yet I could pay more tax than they do because of the fact that it's based on gross receipts. Isn't that true?
Well, I suppose you would have a lot more activity going through that 1 wire, I guess, is that your theory? Because, it's based on the activity.
Well, copper versus fiber is going to make a lot of difference. So anyway, it's a gross receipts tax. It's not just based on the amount of space that I occupy. And it's not based on how much trouble I may be to the owner of the right-of-way as opposed to attaching to a pole or digging up the right-of-way. I pay based on gross receipts, not based on how much land I disturb. The other point that I would like to make that makes this distinction is that if now the technology is going to the small cell, which is basically an antenna that goes on top of a pole. So that antenna is occupying the right-of-way, sending the same kind of signal, but based on wireless as opposed through a wire or through a cable, and yet they're paying nothing in the way of a franchise fee, at least not in the state of Georgia. So, you know, we are basically treating people differently now that occupy the rights of way and those that don't occupy the right of way. So I guess the fact that you're making this simplistic by saying that it is a rent of the right of way and that we're treating all right of way occupiers the same, because we are not.
Well, I think that, so the question of whether or not this is a rent payment for use of public property, I feel strongly that I think it is, and I think that a lot of folks have come to the conclusion that it's rent. It's not something that they're required to pay to the customers. They went to
To the microphone, please. Move back to the microphone.
They went to Congress in 1996 and obtained the right to pass this on as a line item on the bill, but it isn't something that is required to be passed on to customers, and it is a negotiated fee that they have between the local government.
Wait just a minute though. You just got through saying that this is an operating cost of the provider,
Yeah.
but now you're saying it's being passed on to the customer.
It-
So the customer's actually paying
The
this cost.
customer pays it if the cable company chooses to pass it on, because Congress gave them that
Do
right
you
in
know of any that
1996.
don't choose to pass it
I
on?
don't know of any that don't, that agree to pass it on. But I think your point, though, is a good one, which is obviously, you know, local governments should be treating, you know, from my perspective, the local government wants to have control over its right-of-way. I know that the 5G thing has been very controversial across the country because local government wants control of that and wants to, I think, claim the revenue for property that's placed on public land. And so that's a discussion about how that kind of right-of-way compensation is being equally applied. And it's a worthy conversation to have, but that does not convert them into taxes. It's still a rent payment. And if you're not there at all, if you're not using that, then you shouldn't have to pay for it.
Any other questions?
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
You said that this franchise fee was passed on to the customer.
Yes, I believe
Okay,
it is in most
well,
cases.
when so the cable company files their tax return, I'm not a tax lawyer, if it's a rent, then they deduct that rent from as an expense.
Yeah, so I actually,
I don't understand.
I can't remember how they do it on
They're
their.
deducting their franchise fees on their tax return as an expense too?
They have had them listed as operating expenses, but I don't know how they book the revenue, because, you know, so they have a revenue going in and revenue going out. But they have, in the past, it has been listed on their 10K as an operating expense.
If it's an operating expense, then you get to deduct that. So you really,
I apologize, I don't know the answer to
Okay.
how they're
All right,
deducting
thank
it,
you.
but it's a good question.
Mr. Chairman.
Bill?
And you may have answered my question by using the phrase gross receipts, but, and I'm not trying to choose sides, I just want to clarify, because earlier someone said, if they're using like Netflix or a streaming service, but they're using satellite, are they using wires to do that?
Yeah. So to the extent we have customers who have an internet connection and they want to take advantage of those features, they're using their internet connection that they're paying for. And if it's cable company, then they're paying the franchise fee on that. So if you charged a separate franchise fee to us on top of that, they'd be paying for that the access of the rights of way twice, because they're already paying for it when they're paying for their internet connection. But there are, for example, if somebody had satellite internet, they wouldn't be paying any franchise fee at all because they're not touching the local rights of way and there's no franchise agreement.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please correct me if I'm wrong, and I probably am. I'm just a poor farmer. I must say, very poor now.
That's the Sam Watson line.
Well, he's used it quite effectively. Am I correct in assuming that your position is it's you're not so opposed to a communication sales tax or service tax, whatever you call it, communication service tax, as you are opposed to doing away with franchise fees. Am
That's
I correct?
Yes.
Okay,
So if
thank
we went to one of those versions, so a 2% tax on all TV providers, you know, that is not something we have a problem with. The problem we have with is eliminating franchise fees. And we're not going to jump up and down if you start taxing our customers, but that's not the. There have been other states, for example, I think it was Rhode Island or Delaware, where there was some old tax on the book, and the way that they defined it, satellite just wasn't covered. So cable companies were paying it, and we were not, and it had nothing to do with franchise fees, and we did not oppose it when they amended that to include us within that tax, because we do believe in tax parity. We just don't believe franchise fees are taxes.
I wanted to ask a question about Hughes. Is that HughesNet? Is that in parts of rural South Georgia, you'll see signs along the right-of-ways that say, you know, internet, HughesNet, $29.99 a month or whatever. Do you foresee in the near future with the potential to have complete whatever the megabits or gigabytes or whatever will they be able to provide the same type of service that can be provided through fiber or high-speed broadband, that reliable service? Because, you know, one of the things I've been thinking about is we could go through all of this over the next year or two, and then all of a sudden, everything at my house, with the exception of electricity and sewer and water, is wireless. And so what do you think the potential for that is?
Well, look, the technology is just going to continue to improve. So, you know, where we were 7, 8 years ago is Legacy 1. And the way I put it is here, who here still has their iPhone 1? It was a great product when it came out. You know, nobody has one, right? The technology will continue to improve. The satellite technology where it is today, if I came back in 5 years, where we are today, I'm like, why would we have that? You are going to have some limits. I mean, we have to send a signal. Currently, I've got to send a signal 128,000 miles up, back, what have you. As we get lower Earth orbit satellites, we're going to get faster speeds, less latency. As the technology comes out, like I said, the 100 meg service is here in pockets of Georgia today. In a couple of years, it's going to be everywhere. I would say, you know, mid-decade, it's probably going to be 5-10 times that. I don't have their design specs, but it's only going to continue to improve as that new technology has improved. But on top of that, you have 5G coming. You have other technologies also that are rolling out there. So I think you're going to just continue to see improvements as we go. So, you know, and that's a great question. We had somebody say, well, what if we just focus everything to get, you know, a 10-1 service in these markets in the next 3 years? I'm like, that's probably being a little myopic. You want to look at saying, hey, where can we see the best growth and where can we deliver service today? Because frankly, customers aren't going to want to wait 4 or 5 years to get service. They want to have what it has today, and as it improves, they're going to continue to upgrade. Much like we had upgraded from our original iPhone to where we are today with a, you know, Galaxy 7 or iPhone 10. We're going to continue to see these improvements as the technology improves. Satellite television, when it first came out, you know, it had, you know, one receiver. It was $1,000, a little black and white thing, barely the remote really worked. You know, now we have 500 channels. We can pick up from multiple satellites. The technology just continues to improve, you know, and the consumer experience will continue to get better.
Dominic, I just want to clarify something. Where did you say you were seeing those signs? In the
rural South Georgia.
No, you said on the right-of-way.
Right-of-way. So they are using the right-of-way. Couldn't help it. Not.
Can I ask, what pockets of Georgia is this available? Can you give us a map where these things are
The
available?
25.3 is going to be available everywhere. As it relates to the 100 meg service, it's literally by zip code. So it's sort of a spot beam.
Can you give us a map?
I can see if I can get you a map. If you would give me some zip codes, I can let you know that's available. Some of the actual mapping is proprietary by the vendor. The 31790.
31639.
When I was in Indianapolis last week, I walked around, collected business cards, and gave everybody and so earlier on Friday, I sent everybody what type of service they got in any particular market. So after this, give me your address. I will be happy to do
The
that.
HughesNet website will let you put the
Absolutely.
zip code in
Sure.
and tell you what
the HughesNet
service
website,
is.
the Viasat website will allow you to do the same thing, and that will actually that firm has the 100 meg service. They will show that. So before I came down yesterday in this village, the HughesNet has the 25.3. Again, if you just you can put in the address and the zip code, it will tell you where it is. But again, with 100 meg service, it literally is, think of a flashlight beam. If you're within the beam, you're getting it. If you're just outside, you're not. One of the state legislators in Indiana last week was 1 mile outside of the beam. I cannot give them that 100 meg service today. Hopefully in the next year or two I can. But if you've given me those cards, I'd be more than happy to find out for you. Like I said, gentleman here said the website also has it.
Any other questions?
Right here.
Patty?
Just two quick comments in regards to HughesNet. From my study, I discovered that HughesNet, unlike public service communications, didn't offer unlimited data. So if I had HughesNet, I would run out of internet service, run out of data, and had to end up buying more. That was from my experience.
So, when did you do that research? Was that within the last couple of years?
Last 2 years.
Yeah, so that's recently changed. So now they're really offering a much higher data limit plans. If you've exceeded that, they don't make you buy more. They may slow you down. But what we're finding was a lot of people are using their internet for is streaming services. Makes a lot of sense. Your Star is a perfect example.
Yeah.
So what they've done is saying you can record your Stars at any time. So it's sort of like an unlimited block between 2 and 5 a.m. where you can download, and we're encouraging people to download all their video during that point, and then just watch it whenever they would like. That way, it's not hurting their actual data limits. Okay, the Viasat product is offering an unlimited plan, but much like wireless programs, hey, it's unlimited, but if you exceed it, they could throttle you. But you're no longer having to go out and say, oh, I'm at the max, I have to go spend another $50.
Okay.
So really in the last year or so, you've seen that migration change significantly.
Okay, that's good to know. One last point, as it relates to passing franchise fees down to the consumer. I just received a message that public service, if the state eliminates the franchise fees, that public service may consider passing it on over to the consumer. So is there anyone here from public service? I would like to speak with them about that after this meeting today.
So I'm not sure I understand. Public service would.
Public service communications is in my home county, yeah. And they are obviously watching them, but the message that I just received, that if the state eliminates franchise fees, that most likely public service will pass over to the consumer. So I just wanted to share that since that had came up in the conversation. And I just wanted to find someone here that may be representing public service that I can talk more with them about this. But thank you.
Any other questions? I have one last question. Part of what this council is tasked with doing is addressing the lack of adequate access to broadband in rural areas of the state of Georgia. If satellite provides 25.3 in all areas of the state of Georgia, why are residents not subscribing to the service? So my question is it because of pricing? Is it because of latency? Is it because of reliability? Is it because of a limitation on data? I mean, there must be some reason if I'm saying I don't have adequate access, and yet there's 25.3 available everywhere in the state of Georgia. Why is it that I don't consider this adequate?
I'm not the provider, but all of those questions have come up from people. I think we have a poor legacy perception. So, where we were 5-10 years ago, it was a Gen 1 product, and people may have tried it. They didn't have a great experience, and they're reluctant to try that again. And we've seen that. And that was I actually had a call with Hughes yesterday. How can we start reintroducing ourselves to that market? So I think that, it's really incumbent on the provider to start educating the public more of, hey, the technology has improved. those issues have done and what it's been. I also think consumer perception. So a lot of consumers say, hey, look, I need 100 meg service. I want this. And so I think there's some points, they're saying, well, satellite's not going to work for me because of what other particular issues. So we've got some work to do there, but the product is available. Costs are there. It is competitive. I mean, you can't be way over everybody else or nobody's going to ever buy your product. We've got 50, 60,000 customers in the state itself. So it is growing. Is it expanding? We have a lot of work to do. Like I said, it's only been in the last year that we've been able to offer the true high-speed service, so it's really just starting and being available.
Is the startup cost, as far as me getting the antenna and the set-top box or whatever I need?
There is an initial equipment cost, and so, as we look at funding grants and things out there, we've talked to other states and saying, if you're going to be looking at funding, consider that maybe there's a funding off the consumer equipment, some sort of rebate to help them offset that initial cost. Look at an initial cost of about $300 for that equipment. So much like when satellite came out, it was $1,000 to buy your initial DirecTV satellite dish. And then if you want another one, no, the little one. And then if you wanted a second TV, it was $400. So those costs have continued to go. People can lease that equipment for about $15 a month, so it reduces that. But so as the state looks at things, maybe look at saying, look, we've already put our infrastructure up. So if you're going to do infrastructure grants, consider something that helps offset that cost directly to the consumer.
I just want to say I'm not interested in giving a grant if you don't have permission to put it there.
Any other questions? Thank you all very much.
Thank you much.
All right, before we break for lunch, because after lunch we're going to a different topic, are there any discussions or questions that we have that we want to either direct to staff or direct to any of the presenters that we've heard this morning who might still be here before we break for lunch? Hearing none, we're going to break for lunch and we will come back here at 1 o'clock.